All right, here we are live again. The Swoley Trinity is back. I think this is episode, I want to say it's episode, is it 5 or 6?
Five.
I think it's
Five.
Five. So that means it's been 10 weeks now because we do these bi-weekly. So we're working on 10 weeks now, which has got to be some kind of record for me to be committed to a podcast for that. What's going on today, my fellow brohams, with, as usual, Dr. Koresh, Scott Stevenson, and we got to come up with a nickname for Alan too. We got to come up with some type of.
You're calling me Dr. I'm going to come up with something egregious, and you're not going to like it one bit. It's going to be horrible. Like
you know what I think?
That's the thing about revenge is like you get the first strike, but the second strike always hits harder. So we're going to play the Koresh card. I'm coming strong, baby. It's not going to be nice. It may be a rotating sublime insult that comes across. Okay, so just so you know.
I'm ready. I'll try to get ready, man.
All right.
I think we could just go with some of the ones that people used to troll him with online. It's just Alan Arrogant, which is he actually told me about that one. I thought that was
untrue. You know, it's just the opposite of the truth.
Master Arrogant, like Master Splinter from the Ninja Turtles. He's Asian. Master Arrogant. Yeah, it's pretty good. Just came up with that right there on the fly.
Oh, nice. I don't mind that.
Master Arrogant, Dr. Koresh, and El Paul Clark. Not everybody's going to think that as funny as we are because it's a culmination of inside jokes between the three of us.
It's okay.
All right, so as usual, we like to get right into the nut cutting right out of the gate. So let's get into the topics for today because God knows we could all talk forever. We've done it before. The topics for today. Alan, I'm going to let you kick this off because you are so jacked up today. Clearly had way too many pots of coffee. You're excited. I love it, though. I love your enthusiasm for today. So what's the number one topic we're going to kick off with today?
We're going to talk about one of my followers on Instagram. Probably should, I don't know if I want to name him or whether he wants to be named, but he asked, what is the biggest problem in the fitness industry? And it's tough to think of just one problem, right? Because and just the way that you can interpret that question in different ways too, you know? So the way that I see it is, okay, there's 4 pretty big problems in the fitness industry. I think that closed-mindedness amongst the practitioners in terms of their learning capabilities, their just openness to synthesize new and current information that might run counter to their pre-existent beliefs. I think that closed-mindedness is a major problem in the fitness industry because I feel that in order for the field to keep a forward march, we need to be scientific and we need to harbor the spirit of science, which is an open-mindedness to discovery and also a willingness to be wrong about certain things. So I think there's a lack of that in the industry. I think that another thing that's a problem, and we could kind of go more into depth about each of these 4 things, but I think cliquishness, sort of that high school clique mentality, it just continues on from high school into when people are 30, 40, and 50 years old. And I think it's highly prevalent in the fitness industry.
Tell me more, my friend, because I like this one. I like this one a lot because I could expound on that myself. But I'd like to hear you expound on what do you think kind of the cliques are amongst the fitness industry? Like what kind of different cliques are there?
Oh, God. Oh, man. Well,
what kind of different circle jerk groups are we talking about here?
Okay, well.
He says that in the most loving way. Like, you guys, I love you. You're circle jerking over there. Let's talk about it.
There's multiple streams, man. Multiple streams of outcome.
So what do you see, like, from a high level overview when you talk about cliques or like little groups, which I totally agree with you. I mean, I could give you an example. I think, like, I more or less will never be like accepted by the majority of the evidence-based bro crew. Like I just don't fit in with their clique because I'm not formally educated, which I don't care about. But it doesn't matter, like, how much content I produce or who I work with or whatever. Like, it's just not an area that I'm ever going to see them as accepting me as some type of equal because of that. And that's okay. I'm perfectly fine with that because, look, I'm the bro. I said all along from the first episode, like, I'm the bro, on this show. And I kind of work a proxy to the other bros who listen to decipher, like, what it is that we're talking about. Scott's got the most education, and Alan, you've got, like, the second most education. So it's like I'm kind of the conduit between you guys and the bro crowd that comes in and watches our show, which I perfectly embrace. I embrace that wholly, and I'm fine with that.
I have to tell you, Paul, I'm about as big a fucking meat as you can get. So really, when it comes
you're really kind of stupid. Despite you,
I'm a meathead. I'm a meathead. I am. I really am. I love being a meathead.
But you're super educated. It's like it's kind of a different level that comes with that. And
there's a different level to being a cult leader,
Right.
The whole thing on its own.
I 100% believe I could lead a cult better than either of you. 100%.
Well, you're the leader of the largest cult, the Scientology. So
exactly. I believe I could.
Carterology.
Say what?
Carterology.
Yeah, Carterology. I got to write this book. Give me a big exploding volcano.
Right.
I'll do it low rent though. I'll go down to the hibachi place or whatever and have the the guy that he always does the volcano, right? When you go get to the Japanese place, the one over and over. Swear, like they do it every time.
Teppanyaki.
I've seen that trick like a million times. Right? They call it volcano, the onion volcano. Who cares?
Tepanetics will be the name of your book.
What?
Tepanetics by L. Ron Carter. L. Paul Carter. L. Paul Carter.
Trying to get us back on course.
Yeah.
Talk about like some cliques that you.
The cliques that I've witnessed. Okay, so there's major cliques and then there's sub cliques. So like even within, for example, within the academic community, there's sub cliques within the academic community. You have your HIIT, the so-called hit Nazis on one side, one set to failure or death, and nothing else works.
So there's only one I in there, Alan. You put two. That's interval.
Oh, yeah, I messed up. Yeah, right. HIT.
Okay.
I'm getting my hits mixed up. So yeah, there's the HIT, high intensity training. HIT Nazis is what they call them. One set to failure is the only thing that works. Less is better. And then there's the volume all day into the night guys. And they seem to be battling it out constantly, and they seem to be just, you can kind of read the names on the study titles, and before even reading the abstract, let alone the manuscript, you know what the results are going to be after you read the author's names, and it's kind of funny. I think that's a form of cliquishness, and I think that these guys have a general high level of closed-mindedness and high level of defense of their methods that they've found to consistently work over the years and over the decades, and it just becomes really easy to defend that. And I was talking to Brett Contreras. I was on the phone with him yesterday for quite a while, and he, we were talking about sort of the spirit of discovery in research, and for the most part, the right thing to do is to just really try your best to not give a crap about what the results are going to be, because let the chips fall where they're going to fall. I know that with Schoenfeld and Contreras et al., half of their hypotheses end up being refuted by the results. So they have this 50-50 batting average between their hypothesis and the results. And I know that with some other camps, and look, these guys are my friends, so I'm biased towards them, right? So I know that some other camps have pretty much 100%, like, we hypothesize this, and then bam, what do you know? Nice, neat, and clean. fits their hypothesis right off the bat. And so that's something that I'm seeing as sort of a cliquishness and a belief defense culture amongst the sub-cliques within the academic communities. And then the other clique system that I'm seeing is that there is I guess maybe an evidence-based, in quotes, crowd, and then the bro crowd. And Paul, you mentioned being maybe a conduit between the two realms, so you're like a bro do it. And I think that's really cool, man. I've had like endless conversations with you, and with me being in the I guess maybe the evidence-based side or the science-y side, I can say unequivocally that you have the spirit of science despite that you haven't been like publishing in the peer-reviewed literature and stuff. And here's something really interesting, you guys. There's some infighting and cliquishness even below that level. Like I've watched people recently on Facebook say that, oh yeah, well, especially in light of recent events, people have been trying to disparage or discredit the work I've done, and I've heard people say, yeah, well, Alan Aragon, he's not even an academic. And then there was some arguing over that. And then people are like, well, yeah, well, Alan's published this, he's published that. He was invited to write the position paper of the ISSN on body composition and diets and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, but, well, he doesn't work on faculty at a university, so he's not an academic. And I'm reading these and I'm going, all right, I don't really give a flying F whether I can be labeled as an academic or not. If you want to discuss science, you want to discuss research, I'm here, baby. I love this stuff. You want to invite me to write the next position paper? Cool. Yeah. I will go 120% in, and I will do my diligence, and I will work with the best possible people to get this stuff done. You can call me an academic. You can call me whatever the hell you want to call me, but don't try to use those labels as weapons against me. You know what I mean? Oh, he's not on faculty, so therefore he's not an. I don't give a crap. How about we talk about this face to face? How about we talk about this not necessarily face to face, but just in real time? That the next thing I wanted to go over that's a problem in the fitness industry, other than closed-mindedness and cliquishness, is the gossip, the fakeness. And frankly, I don't even know if I want to talk about the hypocrisy in the fitness industry. That would open a can of worms. And
that would be a nice one to get in. We could totally get. Me, I'm willing to get into anything.
Don't stop him now, man. He's rolling.
Yeah. I don't even know if there's this discussion of hypocrisy in the fitness industry is yeah. But I would rather see us as a community be open-minded to discussion. I'd rather see us as a community be open-minded to real-time debates. One thing that really made me happy was when Lyle McDonald and Mike Israetel got online and did a live debate on on the Revive Stronger podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Steve Hall rounded those guys up, and they had a live debate. And I've seen Lyle refuse debates over and over and over for many, many, many years. And I was like, why the heck won't Lyle get on there and discuss and debate? He's a brilliant guy. He reasons very well. He writes really well. He writes very conversationally and engagingly. He speaks well. I've seen him speak before. Why won't he just get the hell on there and debate? And so I've seen Brett Contreras call Lyle out for debate many, many times, and Lyle refused and many, many times. And then finally he gets on and debates Mike Israetel and it's like a 2-hour thing, and you get to see both their personalities at work. You get to see Mike Israetel's very sort of slick, bedside manner. He's a soft spoken, he's a gentle guy, and he's not very confrontational. And then you kind of get to see Lyle just sort of steamrolling through there, but in a civil way. And it was really freaking awesome. I would love to see more real-time civil debates happen in the fitness industry rather than everybody gathering up on Facebook and just talking amongst themselves.
Being passive aggressive, kind of like I'm not naming any names here, but just name names, dude. Like I've never had a problem with that. And that's kind of the funny thing is I had that conversation with I'm training, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm training Jordan Syatt now, who was Gary Vee.
Shout out, baby. Jordan's
shout out to Jordan. I had that conversation with Jordan because he's been shouting me out everywhere, which I appreciate. But I had that conversation with Jordan. I said, it's funny. I said, because it doesn't matter. You can get on the net and say, I like vanilla ice cream. That itself, somebody can tell you what a piece of shit you are for liking vanilla ice cream. And then somebody's going to hate you because at one point you said you like vanilla ice cream, or say that's potentially a racist statement. I don't know.
Do you know what goes into the harvesting of those vanilla beans, Paul? Like the people that are subjugated?
Way to create the vanilla ice cream. Well, it's dairy, right? So we know that if it came from Fairlife Farms, despite the fact that all that was bullshit, that there were animals abused in the process of me getting my ice cream. Mm-hmm. The point is, and I told Jordan that, I said that you never know, like you can't get any significant amount of visibility in the fitness industry. I think that probably applies to almost any industry at all, right? Without developing a fair amount of critics or criticism about almost anything that you say. So you have to kind of, at some point, say, this is, I'm gonna put my roots down here. This is what I believe, and here's my principles, and I'm gonna say what I think or what I believe and whatever, and let the chips fall where they may. But if you're one of those people, I feel like, and you get on your line and you're consistently trying to placate to everyone's emotions, to me that just says you don't have much of a backbone or believe in anything at all. So if you're going to ever take a stance on something, if you're ever going to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I adhere and ascribe to, fundamentally, this is, a part of what makes up my belief system, there's going to be other people that are going to dislike you for adapting different belief systems, principles, ideologies than runs counter to what they do. For example, like I think Greg Nichols is a shithead little troll. So not like troll like he goes around trolling people. I just don't necessarily respect the guy. And here's the thing. He doesn't respect me, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to be his buddy. There's multiple reasons why I don't. I'm perfectly okay with saying that out loud. I think anybody that's followed me for a significant period of time probably knows that already. So by kind of like one of those things, by proxy, the fact that Greg doesn't like me or I don't like Greg, but there's other people I don't like too that don't like me, and I don't give a shit. But the fact that it's there, Alan, I just talk clean. I'm always going to be that way, and that's what some people like that, and then other people's like, oh, what a douchebag or what an asshole. And the thing is, like Scott can tell you, Alan, you can tell people whatever. When I have friends who are keeping my inner circle, I am loyal. I love them. I will be there with them to the ends of the earth for whatever reason. But if somebody wants to go hard in the paint at me, I'm like, all right, that's cool. Let's go hard in the paint. That's just the way that I function. It's like, I don't wake up every day and go, oh, what degree of asshole can I be today? Like that's never comes into my mind. I've had spent many hours on conversations about real life stuff with both of you guys. And I love you guys and will always be here for you. And anybody that I allow into that part of my life, I'm incredibly loyal to. But then internet persona can be completely different. I actually try to be as authentic and real and transparent as possible in both ways. Scott, I think you would say, from knowing me as well as you do, that what I present online is who I really am in real life.
Pretty much, yeah. You're authentic. That's the sort of the definition of authenticity, is that you're not flip-flopping your personality. Everyone puts on a different face depending on the social context. You don't go up to, a senator who you've never met and say, "What's happening, Broham?" and give him a fist bump.
Right.
You might greet him differently, but that doesn't mean that you're not acting authentically. You are a straight shooter. And that's something
I heard a guy say that the other day. Said all of us I wrote this past week. We all have not different personalities, but different people. I wrote about that.
Social roles.
our relationships in life either cause us to expand or recoil to some degree. So we have those friends where we have fun with, where we're silly with, we're goofy with. We have those friends that we can engage in intellectual conversations, stimulating intellectual conversations. We have those friends that kind of or relationships that kind of put us in our place and tell us when we're messing up, when we're screwing up, and then that sometimes that pisses us off or whatever. But if it causes us pause for thought in order to grow, then those relationships are still they're still transformational in some way. They still help expand us. And then you can have detrimental relationships in your life where somebody makes you feel small, lesser, makes you feel like you're more insignificant, or you don't have as much value in that relationship as maybe you feel like that they should by you. So that's kind of how I view things. And I don't really keep people in my life that cause the latter, that cause them to make me feel like I'm insignificant as far as like being important in their life or a priority, those kind of things. And I always tell people that's how you should develop your relationships. Develop relationships that help you grow, help expand you, help stretch you, help create transformation in your life in a positive way that you want to see come to fruition. And I have no idea how the hell I got here from Alan's last few comments about the cliques that we have in the fitness industry. Other than the fact, like I said, it's like I hear that, I've heard that before. It's like some people, if somebody doesn't like something I've written or doesn't agree with me, I'm perfectly okay with that. And it takes a while to come to terms with that, because Alan, I know you struggle with that at times too. And I think that's a normal part of the normal human condition, is that we do desire acceptance and we do desire affirmation that our work is meaningful or valued, right? So when somebody has something to say that often we feel like it detracts from our accomplishments or kind of who we think we are from an identity standpoint, we can often have a bit of internal backlash about that. And I think that's a normal part of just being human, right? Like that's one of the biggest things that we have. We want acceptance, especially if it's something that we feel like that we're good at and that we work hard at. And somebody's like, nah, you've never accomplished anything of significant value. You're like, wow, really? Like I've been at this for 30 years and I've done X, Y, Z. I'd be like if I walked up and said, yeah, Scott, you're really not that educated. I don't know what the fuck you're going on and on about with that whole PhD thing in front of you. No, but that's the point. That's where you have to get right there. You have to, I don't care.
I mean, it doesn't really mean that much. I know this just because anyway, that's a long story. You know, the thing that you guys have both pointed to, and I'm going to step even back a bit further, is one manifestation of the challenge that faces humanity, and that's overcoming the fact that we're apes living in a non-apish world. We're tribal. All those things you were talking, the cliquishness, the in-group versus out-group, the bros versus the evidence-based guys, the ivory tower versus in the trenches, the natty versus enhanced.
Wars.
Wars. Well, we don't learn from our fucking past. And what happens, because we have built into our biology this tribalism, and I always sort of very often will reference Dunbar's number, which is this idea that we're sort of equipped psychologically to function in small tribal groups, 50, 100, maybe 150 people, not very big, where the nature of our social interaction is totally different than what we see online. What we see online is totally flip-flopped. If someone in a small group setting, let's say you put some people into, you've probably seen this when you go to like long seminars over the course of a long weekend, let's say, and there's maybe 100 people or 50 people in there, and someone just was being this brash asshole the way people will be online, that might garner attention. Those people might become a YouTube, 500,000 subscriber type person. Whereas in that more naturalistic type of setting, it would be like, that guy's a dick. Like, what? Like he would be probably ostracized, or she, depending on whoever that is. So things are flip-flopped online. People behave in a totally different way. The limbic resonance, the emotional brain connection that we have when you see someone in person, the thing people always say is people say shit online they never would in person. They would never get away with. And that's part of the limbic resonance. One of the
theories that I've told you before, I think I've told both of you this at one point, I said, that the safer a bubble that somebody is in, the more dysfunction it will reveal about who they are. And so when somebody
rocks and living in glass houses, that sort of
thing. So when somebody is behind a computer screen, right, and they have a lot of dysfunctionality internally, then that'll often come out online, the way they talk. Like that's why you get the majority of guys that I get that are like trolls or talk shit or whatever. It's a private profile, like no picture. Or they may have a picture, but it's always a private troll. They're always hiding. That's the thing, is they're always hiding.
Very often the case, yeah.
They want to hide. They want to sit behind that safety of that bubble, and then they want to throw, poke the bear, throw stones from there. And the majority of guys who are out there, and here's the one thing I will say, is about the fitness community and anybody that has any real amount of significant visibility in it, is that you don't really find the majority of us going to one another's social media and starting shit with each other. Like I don't go to anybody's social media to start shit. Like I have too much to do with my day to waste my time. It's the guys that really are sitting back and watching that don't really contribute in any kind of meaningful way, like to go around and start shit with people. And I think that gives them a feeling of significance in their life. If you want me to play psychologist here, because I'm going to go out and start shit with this guy and he's going to respond to me. And I just
empty can that rattles the most, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and to me, that's just a symptom of their own internal dysfunction.
So the solution, that's the thing. Like we can rant about this for forever, but I think the solution is for everyone to start recognize these things, but diffuse them whenever possible, and if someone comes at you like, and I don't get in like troll wars with people. I either just like, if I see it's like there's a total loss, I'll just exit. I'll just be gone.
Yeah, you've done that before.
I'm like what the fuck? But I'll also have people come at me, and this not so much anymore, but maybe because people don't know that I'm a very good target. But I just am non-reactive. It's like, this is just really quite silly. It'd be like someone starts shooting spit wads at you. You're like, really? That's awesome. We're having a spit wad war. That's about how meaningful it is in my mind. Oftentimes when someone challenges you online, because that filter, and not always. I mean, it depends on the person. Sometimes your online persona is your way of making your living. So there's some weights there. You can't totally, toss that away as an immaterial type of thing, but there's so much artificiality that's there that we have to recognize that we're not equipped to recognize. If someone calls you a fuckwad or a shithead, or they call you out, or they do something which is a personal attack, we're wired biologically to take that as a personal attack and not realizing that may not even be a real person. Like, do you guys remember? You probably remember this guy. I don't know if you know who he is. I've been online since sort of the beginning of the dawn of the internet, and I've seen fake personas come on over time. There's a guy on a bodybuilding board, professional muscle, who went by Fathead, and he infiltrated the inner circle there for years using fake pictures, and then finally kind of came out. And it just like, for people were so pissed for months. There was the guy GH15 who was renowned. You remember GH15, right?
All those commas, all those.
Yeah, testosterone and trenbolone. And who is this guy? Which pro is this guy? Like,
he developed a cult-like following.
He developed his own bodybuilding board. He started selling gear online. Like, he bamboozled tens of thousands of people, I would imagine, at least.
Yeah, everyone's trying to figure out what pro is he. People are thinking, is it Nasser? Is it, is it this?
I know people who spend like hundreds of hours of their life trying to track through the proxies that he'd set up to cover up his IP address and this kind of stuff. And so, like, the fact that can happen is really, like, that tells you how deep and how easily our brains can be confused by all this online interaction, which is so real or unreal and lacking in real human connection. And I think we got to realize that, and then kind of start over. Like, okay, so to start over here, you're online, I'm online. Now let's talk like people. So go ahead, Paul. I think you wanted to interject something.
No, I was going to say the truth is, like, we're not even wired for this.
No, not even close.
Wired for this. Like, you mentioned something I want to go back to. It's a great point. Was talking about, we're wired for being tribal. We're wired for a small community. We're wired for pair bonding. And so it's like the world we're living in right now like we'll never adjust to it completely because we're literally not wired for it. We're surrounded by so many supernormal stimuluses that we're overloaded from the time that we get up. And people wonder why that anxiety, depression, all these things that are pretty much off the charts these days. And it's because we have all of these stimuluses all day long that are basically coming at us from food to the internet to, well, pretty much everything on the net, but just everything is right there for us, and we have access to it continually, and we're more depressed than ever. And that honestly, that comes back to another psychological theory that's known as, God, I can't remember the name of it. Basically, it states that the more choices that you have, the more disappointed you will consistently be. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think they confuse that with freedom. Right, they confuse that. Freedom is one of the things that actually is that we need.
Choice paradox happens on dating sites. Where
choice paradox, exactly. Yeah. So, one of the things that gets confused by people these days is that they believe having an abundance of choices is a type of freedom, but it's not. It's just variety, and it has nothing to do with freedom.
It reduces the satisfaction when you've made a choice because you're thinking, oh, did I fuck up? Like, oh, there was like 5. Maybe I didn't choose the right one. Whereas if you just give people like a control group, like, here's your choice.
Two or three choices.
They're super. That apple's fucking awesome, but they're not thinking, should I have a pluot or should I have an orange? Or there could have been a tangerine. Like, the choices actually reduce our satisfaction with whatever our life circumstance is.
Yeah, people use introspection with that, even though something as simple as like a cheat meal. It's like, right? Like you have a cheat meal and you're thinking for weeks and weeks. You're you're 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from a cheat meal. Like, I can't wait to eat. And then your cheat meal day comes around and your mind is flooded with all these different things that you want. And like, no matter what you end up picking, more times than not, you feel like that maybe I could have had something else that would have been better, right? Like
the post-show meal, like how many times have you been with someone who's just competed and they're like, do I want to do IHOP? No, I like Denny's because they have better omelets. But, oh, there's Cheesecake Factory, but the Burger King would be just badass. I want a Whopper.
I was with Fred Small's post-show. I wanted to punch him in the face because we left the show. And literally, we ended up getting bar food at the end of the night because we drove around to so many places, not able to figure out what the fuck he wanted. I hope Fred sees this and knows he was why I was so pissed off in the car that night. And we were driving around for, like, I don't remember how long it was. And one place was closed. We ended up at Steak and Shake. And he had to have his fucking shake this really particular way. If I could have pulled him out of the car that night and beat the brakes off of him for that, I remember we were just going around for hours. I'm like, dude, just place and get some.
How did Fred Smalls even fit in the car is what I want to know.
Well, because he's 4'3". So
is that right? I've seen pictures of him. He just looks like a
floorboard. Wow. Yeah, we just put him in the floorboard, so he was fine. But I mean, it's the paradox of choice, and like I said, we're not meant for this. We're meant for those small. I think that's why we gravitate to that, even online, right? To those small cliques, to those tribals. Because here's the other part about that: life has to have meaning for everybody. Like that's what if your life doesn't have any meaning, what you're doing and waking up to each day and working towards, there has to be something that's giving your life significant meaning. Otherwise, you're going to be depressed. You're going to feel like, well, I'm just doing all this for nothing, right? So the other part about increasing that value, the meaning of whatever it is you're doing in life that gives you meaning, is finding other people who also have that same belief system. And that's what creates that tribal sense of belonging. So now I'm doing something, whether I'm doing, like we use the diet, or whether it's a training style, Alan, like you were talking about, whether it's like you're doing low volume, high intensity, or high volume, or whether you do keto, or whether you do paleo, or whether you do flexible dieting or whatever, it's like you find something that kind of gives a certain amount of meaning to whatever you're doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it, right? Like, think about the things that you do, that if you dig deep enough, you'll figure out all those things give you some sense of meaning, right? That they speak value into your life, and you really like doing it for that reason. So the next step in that evolution is to create that whole tribal concept, is to find other people that also share that same belief system, right? Like, you don't find, like, if you go to church on Sunday, like, you're not going to find Hindus. Like, if you go to a Christian church, you won't find Hindus, Satanists and all of us, because we have different belief systems that we're ascribing to. So we find different places to go to share in that meaning with other people, which then that deepens that sense of meaning for us as individuals, and that is a huge part of creating those psychological needs that we have in each and everyday life, right? So I think
I'm gonna draw an analogy there, Paul, because what you said is super important. That is an intelligent way to find people who share common philosophies, orientations, or what have you. But it's perverse when we're online. It's not the same as going to church. It's kind of like you're seeking out nutrition. You go to get your food from a vending machine. You're going to get fucked up food. If you're going to get your social interaction from people who match your inclinations and belief systems, it can be very easily perturbed because you're online. You're not in person. You're not seeing. You can't get good psychological nourishment from people online in the way that you can in person. Just like you can't get good food from a vending machine, like you can if you're on a farm or in the produce and blah blah blah. So keep going, but that's very important what you just said.
Yeah, and I think that's what we see online is that, but I think you'll find the same thing though, Scott, is that somebody that's very dysfunctional, say very negative, dysfunctional, and their perception about life, for example, is very negative. I'll go back to here's an example of one a while back with people bitching, like when I actually removed a guy. This is kind of one of my things, my pet peeves, is I actually removed a guy off my social media because he was constantly bitching. Like we were going into Endgame. Endgame was coming out. And I was, I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I was super excited. And that's the thing, you connect with other people that are excited about that, and that builds your excitement. You have discussions, right? That's like a positive thing. How can somebody hate the fact that there's this group of people over here that are excited about something that does no harm to anyone? And they're all like, man, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait to go. We'll talk about it after. I had people calling me the day that it came out. And those are all positive things we get to live for in life. Now, are we curing cancer? No, but it's a part of entertainment. And those things are an important part of just living a more whole life, finding things that entertain you, but that's not hurting anybody. So this guy literally posts something like, Marvel fans are the worst. Can't believe like my new seat's filled up with all these assholes that are having fun. Basically, that's paraphrasing, but essentially,
it's like bitching about people who are excited about Game of Thrones.
Dude, when something happens, like it's a Kentucky Derby or something, like I don't pay attention to, but it's like filling up my feed. I love that, even if it's something that I don't have like any interest in. When I see like a whole bunch of people that are excited, what was it? It was this past week. It was the hockey, right? The St. Louis Blues.
Stanley Cup.
I don't watch hockey, but I was so excited because I saw so many people, showed up in my feed that were like celebrating, watching, the hockey finals, whatever that was called, because I don't watch hockey. But I was like, that's cool. I thought it was cool. I actually went out and watched like the everybody getting together in St. Louis, like for the festivities and the parade. And I thought, man, that's really cool. And it hits me. It's like I'm consistently excited when I see like a group of people like that. They come together and they're celebrating something. And it's just, there's a certain amount of joy, meaning that gives those people, it's not hurting anyone. And I think, man, you have to be really internally fucked up. You got to be claiming ownership to some really non-virtuous traits each day to wake up and say, all these people having fun while they're not hurting other people. Really.
Both of you guys.
Talk about little cliques, right? So dysfunctional people will tend to gravitate towards other dysfunctional people. And it's not until that you actually start using a certain amount of introspection to see, like, what are you claiming ownership every day? That's one of the things I consistently try to tell people. What virtues are you claiming ownership of every day? Are you working from a place of anger, bitterness, cynicism, resentment, basically shame, guilt? All of those things. So when you're working from those places, when you claim ownership of that stuff, you're not going to be open to allowing joy and happiness, love. You're not going to be able to be capable of giving those things out either. So you will consistently gravitate towards all of those negative virtues, those negative traits as well. Right. So that's like the constant cycle.
Let me interject something because I think this is kind of an important. There's what you said to me reminded me of Eckhart Tolle's notion of the pain body. Mm-hmm. Is that people have in themselves like this pain, this sort of Pac-Man entity which just feeds on pain, and they want other people to be in pain. Like they're an empty can who's rattling. It's like they want to find someone else who's pissed off because Endgame is taking up their Facebook feed or what have you, because they want more pain. They want more shit to complain about. And I think one thing you can do, some people are just like, because it's online, you can't connect with them, but you can say, I can see that. What do you like? What's your favorite? What do you really dig? Like, what's your Endgame is not your thing, man, but what do you like? What do you like? What tickles your fancy? And show that person some compassion, and say, like you said, your life must be really fucked up if you have to, you see happy people and it makes you mad. Like, what a terrible place to be living from.
That's what I thought.
And being compassionate is a first step for us. Seeing that is like, we see a troll, you see someone who's being a dick, it's like, they're probably not they're not the manifestation of Mephistopheles. They're not an evil, demonic, horrible person. They're just fucked up. So compassion is a great first spot to say, okay, what are you really pissed at, man? Really, why are you so upset?
What is it?
Yeah.
What's wrong? I had that one night with a guy that came at me in my DMs and was criticizing me, whatever. And I asked him, I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I said, what's bothering you tonight?
Yeah.
And he just kept going, and I kept saying, I was like, what's bothering you tonight?
Really wrong.
What happened prior to that, Paul?
Yeah.
What was the blow up prior to that? What was he doing?
Oh, it was something I had posted a movement video of something, and he was criticizing it, and then just coming really hard at me. I was like, dude, what's really bothering you?
It didn't even matter what it was. You could tell, he was totally inappropriately pissed off.
Sometimes I'm super compassionate, but if I'm having a bad day too, sometimes I can be like, well, dude, you're just kind of an asshole, and I just move on about my day. So I would love to be perfect and always be willing to drill into when somebody's hurting and connect with them. But I fail at that as well myself sometimes. But I just started asking him. I was like, dude, what's really bothering you? I was like, it's just an exercise video. What are you so pissed off about? And he actually ended up confiding in me once he settled down that he had felt suicidal the whole day, and he ended up opening up to me. I stayed up till 4:00 in the morning talking to him, and he talked about how much he appreciated that. And I checked on him again pretty much every other day for the next couple of weeks, and life slowly started getting better. He had some things open up for him that helped him feel like he got his emotional equilibrium back. But more often than not, that's the case, is that anger is almost never a root emotion. And more times than not, the root emotion is fear or pain. Mm-hmm. And anger is usually the manifestation of one of those two feelings. I mean, if they think hard enough about a time when they've lashed out at somebody they love because something happened, more times than not, it's because of pain. And that's how we often
being afraid of more pain.
Right.
Fear aggression.
So
yeah.
It's that concoction of pain and fear that ends up kind of creating that recipe for anger that ends up coming out. But if you'll just many times, if you can put that initial attack aside and look at somebody sincerely and say, what's really hurting with you right now?
And that can be the beauty of the internet. And I don't know when I figured this out a long time ago, maybe just from getting into silly interactions that were just like, why the hell did I do it? I just wasted time. Is that, because people say shit to me, or I see things, I get messages that I'm like, oh fuck, not this again, and so when I've got into a habit, I'm really lucky that I've been pretty good at this. I'm like, I don't have to answer that now. It's online. But there's an advantage to not having that direct personal connection, is that if someone comes up to you in real life and says, hey Scott, you're a dick, you kind of may have to address that right then and there, because they're right there in your face. They may not be moving out of the way. But if someone says, hey, Scott, you're a dick, I'm like, okay, I'll deal with you later. Or whatever. I just won't, I'll see the notification. I'll just leave that alone. Or and then I'll come back to it if I want to.
That whole delete, swipe, delete.
Yeah. I get messages in my DMs on Instagram that will sit there for days and even weeks sometimes, because I'm like, I'm not in the mood to deal with that right now. And then once I'm like, I feel better. I'll answer this guy's question. It's the same question I've answered. So you can do that. It's a wonderful way to handle things.
Yeah, I had the other day, and it was after I put up my Father's Day post, and it was full of statistics I went and read about how we need fathers in the home, how we need good fathers.
Yeah.
And a guy chimed in, and it's not there anymore. It's deleted. He told me, stick to writing about muscle and strength. And I was like, excuse me? And he's like, he's like, your fitness stuff that you write's great, but the other stuff you write's garbage. I'm like, I actually used statistics that I went out and read about, like from, a multiple degree of like census places on fatherless homes. I don't understand how just presenting you with that information that's collected from a census is like garbage. But clearly, I think the point there, and I didn't even get into it with him, more than likely the post itself probably rubbed him in the wrong way because he probably grew up without a father in his life and then feels like what I'm saying is, hey, you're a piece of shit because you didn't have a dad and that's not even your fault, which is the point is my whole post is that we need men to step up and be accountable in their lives to their children. And so even if you didn't, and I had multiple men weigh in on the fact that they grew up and didn't know their dad and they helped break that cycle by being involved in their children's life. And man, if that doesn't make your heart swell, I don't know what I mean, you must be dead inside. And
I tell you what, it's interesting, Paul. Now imagine I'm going to think of like a real life situation where let's say maybe you're in a like a close knit, like you get sat at a restaurant and like maybe you have to share a table with someone that you don't know. And you just end up having kind of a conversation. You're talking with someone and that person's there, and you're like, you have to pass the salt type of thing, and you provide those statistics about the importance of fatherhood, and you see in that guy that he's bothered by it. Now, if he sees that online, he fires back in that way, and says, stick to the bodybuilding shit. You don't know what the hell you're doing otherwise. But in real life, you could have seen seen the truth of his reaction, and the interaction would be totally different. So, I mean, that's very possible, I think. Yeah.
Such a huge point, because when you're in person with someone, like you can get online and you can type and say, hey, you're fat. Go suck some dog balls. Like you could tag, like just type that out to somebody, right?
You tell me that all the time. So
I tell you that all the time. But my point is, I can tell it to a stranger. But the point is, if I was in person with somebody and I look at them and go, you know what, you're fat and you're really kind of a piece of shit, and I don't know them though, they're like the look on their face, whatever. Why are you laughing now?
Because that's what Korean
people do. That's how the internet is, though. It removes that. There's right. So you're working from that point of dysfunction. And so, like, if you look at somebody in real life and you could see, like, let's say they were sitting at a table and they were talking about how frustrated they are with they've been dieting and doing all this activity and they're frustrated with their weight loss. And you sit down with them and you can see that pain or you can see that frustration on their face, right? You're not going to look at them and go, well, you should just move more, you fat piece of shit. But people on the internet will do that. But it's something, the truth is 99% of people are not going to do in real life. And I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had where some guy was talking shit to me and I was like, they always claim they're going to say this to you in real life. But I've been to a million expos and see these guys talking shit. They never have anything to say in real life.
Have you guys ever noticed, and this isn't me going on a grumpy old man trip.
That's all right. Go on, grumpy.
But have you ever kind of noticed the age bracket of folks who are a bit more brash online? Think about this. The internet started technically in the early 80s, right? And then social media really didn't start catching fire until Facebook came about in the early 2000s.
What, bro? You weren't in some AOL chat rooms?
What you know about AOL chat rooms?
Oh yeah.
So basically, people who have spent a certain amount of their young adult lives without the internet, before the internet even happened, I feel like they have a bit more sensitivity to kind of the differences between how people react online versus how they would interact in person. And I think that the communication skills, the listening skills, a bit more of the even the empathetic or the empathy of just communicating online. I think there's a difference between people who knew what it was like before the internet versus people who kind of got their start or have no idea what communication was like before social media or before the internet. And something I noticed, like, for example, I'll give you an example. When Kevin Hart was getting nailed for his old tweets back in, I don't know, he did some do you guys remember the nature of his tweets that he was getting popped for?
I believe he had some, like, what was it, like some kind of like gay tweets, or like he was just.
Like, that's what it was. Right.
Like like a decade ago or something, right? Like it was a long time ago, and he was just having fun. And people say, well, you can't use that. You can't use that word. He used the word gay in what would people consider a derogatory way, and I believe that's what the nature of that was.
So he had some tweets that he regrets, right? So everybody's piling on, saying every possible horrible thing, and I truly, I mean, if you could run some sort of a analysis on this, but I think the age bracket of everybody chiming in and taking shots at Kevin Hart, a lot of them were not adults or weren't even alive before the internet happened, because the only people who do that in person are truly dysfunctional people who are ready to, who just have some sort of lack of sense of self-preservation. You don't start calling somebody names in person unless you're ready for some shit to go down. I think
it's Jordan Peterson said that. I think that's one of the things that he talked about with communication between men in person is that the thing that oftentimes tends to keep things kind of civil between men in person is there's always the underlying threat of potential violence. And some people get upset about that and say that's toxic masculinity. I go, no, that's masculinity itself. Because the point is, you growing up, one of the things that helps kind of keep the peace between you as friends, or even establish a pecking order, the hierarchy, whether people like that or not, that was how things were. And they still, in some ways,
still apes.
Yeah, because when I was growing up, in my teens, like I got in a lot of fights, and I knew that if somebody was you knew that if you popped off to somebody, there was always the threat that you and that person could throw down.
Absolutely.
And so, in other words, there was a certain degree of you're messing around and you're kind of you're joking with each other, because bros do that, right? Like we insult each other as a way of kind of bonding. But you also knew, like, if you were going to get into some shit, there was that threat that you could get your ass beat. And so kind of came with that. So it created this sense of we have these boundaries, and I know if I'm going to step over into this I'm going to step over this line here, that there can be consequences with stepping over that line. But with online, and a lot of these kids that are young that never learned that particular lesson, the way they run off at the mouth, they don't understand that concept of, okay, well, I'm going to talk to this person online, but I'm going to do so in a way that I knew if they were standing here in front of me, I would continue talking with them the same kind of way. And lots of guys will say they would do that, but the truth is, the majority of the time they won't. Like, not these younger guys.
Yeah. Something I'm doing more and more on social media communication, and I'm spending most of my time on Instagram now, is when somebody asks me a question, I'll use the audio function to answer it. Because I'm frankly, I'm getting tired of typing, on this tiny keyboard on my phone, and
because answer a question, which I don't mind answering questions, but typing it out it takes so much longer.
Yeah, it's brutal, and I think that there's value in being able to speak your answer out, and I think you can make your points better in a lot of cases. And what I used to do before I knew that you could speak for a whole minute on the Instagram DMs before it cuts you off, I was like, I'm sick of typing. I'm going to just speak 15 seconds at a time on the video thing. And discovering the audio was a big thing, because now I just I'd say maybe 75% of the time I'll answer the questions in audio instead of speaking it out, because I'd rather just get on the phone with people. I've received some insults where I just call the person on DM, just video call, bam, and they'll never pick it up. They're like, what's going on? Hi, why are you calling? I'm like, let's talk this out. You got something to say out there. Let's talk this out right now. Let's talk it out in real time.
Go ahead.
I think that a lot of folks who grew up pre-internet, they think that the way you communicate online is just to kind of go into your id and just type it out. Just type out your id, and that's how it is. and then you lead your double life. You get off the internet, and then you go around groveling to people or staying just clamming up. Mm-hmm. I think that's a highly dysfunctional way to develop, and like Paul said, I don't think we're wired for that kind of thing to be able to develop properly.
I wanted to say something because there's a paradigm shift that is almost an almost impossible one for someone who's younger to have. I would imagine. I can't know, and that's sort of the paradox of all of this, in that they've grown up in a culture where that is the norm, to just fire off in that way with a long text message. And you can imagine
text messaging is pretty awful for having conflict.
It's terrible. But listen, hold on to this analogy. This is an analogy of people. If you meet someone from a culture that's very, very different than yours, where let's say they have a totally different perspective on personal space, how close you stand to someone, whether you open doors for them, do you make eye contact, or what have you. They could be behaving in your culture just completely bizarrely, which is absolutely normal for them. And they would know the difference, and you both would think you're just the weirdest. Plop those two people on a deserted island and don't tell them what's going on. They would think that they're both the weirdest. Like, what? Are you even a human being? Like, were you raised by pigs in the back of a barn? Like, what's going on here? That's literally, I think, the kind of the gap that can be between people that are a little bit older, like you're saying, and I think there's something to say for having sort of experienced pre-internet and post-internet social interaction and kind of knowing both cultures, because you can't even, because your cultural perspective is so rooted in what you've experienced in terms of those normal interactions, quote unquote normal, you can't, literally, it's impossible to step out of that perspective. And I mean, this was just, I was just still in the Western world, but when I was in college, I was a foreign exchange student. I went to Germany. And I didn't speak any English. I forced myself to speak German. Although the Germans wanted to speak English with me, I spoke German the whole time. I just immersed myself as much as I could. And it was a transformational type of experience for me. I grew up as a kid in the Midwest. I hadn't really moved around a lot, blah, blah, blah. That was just totally different. So
you speak fluent German now, don't you?
It's still, I mean, fluent is all relative, but yeah, I can hold any conversation in German that I want because I force myself.
That's Dr. Koresh, right? Like, he doesn't go learn like French where he could like serenade a woman somehow, like by talking to her. Like, he's gonna go learn German, like one of the hard, like one of the most like hard. Like, when I talk to you, I'm gonna sound like that. And I'm about to throw you into the back of my car in the trunk and
Du wirst machen, was ich will, dass du machen willst. Genau das und nichts anderes.
Like, no woman's getting, her knees are not knocking. There's no woman out there here and her knees start knocking, right?
Yeah, like when I sound like Colonel Clink or Sergeant Schultz.
Spanish the way like the Spaniards do, right? None of that. Just
we had a phenomenal German teacher, and then I just got started that direction and went that way. But anyway, the point is that it's like, we have a really if you keep, it's almost talking about the cultural thing. Like if I spoke, you guys don't know what I said in German. I know there's probably some German listeners who heard what I said and they probably would have thought that was mildly funny. But it'd be like me starting to speak in German now. I'd be like, what the hell is he talking about? I think when people hear the point that you made, which was a wonderful one, Alan, they're like, well, why would I want to talk to him on video? I could just text it to him. Like, why would I want to? Why would it'd be as odd as saying, well, maybe I should just type it out in Korean, or I should type it in German, or I should sign language it to him in a video. It's like, why would you do that? It makes no sense because it's completely outside of the cultural bubble that they're used to. So that's the difficult thing, is to realize that cultural gap and then start working to come together. And that's very difficult to do as humans that are tribal.
I think we are. This is kind of how society works. There's almost always a paradigm shift from one way to the other. And we've become so detached socially and personally connected with one another and become more connected through a medium, right? And I think at one point down the line, we'll have a paradigm shift where it swings back the other way. People don't connect this way, that people find. That's my hope. Now, it could turn into one of those sci-fi movies where we go down to the local mall and we strap into some kind of machine and we connect, I don't know, sexual. Like, we're already making sex dolls, sex robots. Yeah.
Our brains are wired to become cyborgs in a major way. I was thinking of the book by Norman Deutsch, The Brain That Teaches Itself, that I would highly recommend to people. And our brains are so plastic in so many ways. It explains why we can so easily fall into the paradigm of interacting online and consider that normal in a certain way, and not even recognize that it's bizarre. Like you can actually do things like hook up tactile stimuli to an individual's tongue that will replace the sense of balance or even sight. You can actually, the brain will rewire itself in that tremendous of a way. You don't even have to like wire directly into the occipital cortex where normally the visual centers would be, and the brain can make sense of that. And so you tell someone like, oh, you're actually seeing through your tongue? Like what? There's no eyes involved? That's bizarre, right? But if we're capable of that sort of thing, then we're capable of thinking that it's normal to like rant and rave in text messages on the internet without a doubt. So our brains can flip in a way we're unaware of. We don't have the global perspective so many times to know what we've actually gotten ourselves into, and we're getting ourselves into it big time, I think. So,
well, then as far Alan said, number one, he said, as far as what's wrong with the fitness industry, he said dogmatism was number one.
Yeah, closed-mindedness. Then there was cliquishness. There was gossip, fakeness, hypocrisy, a lack of
human nature,
open discussion, a lack of open discussion. There's too much of a culture.
So I think that you said kind of a fix, kind of a global fix to a lot of the problems that you think that we have within the industry would be that we do a better job of having those open discussions with one another rather than being catty as shit in comments online.
Yeah, it's kind of like a culture of let's talk about it without slinging mud. Let's talk about it. What is your position? Okay, great. Let's get that really clear.
You know, that's
this
really
is what I disagree about with your position.
It's
okay,
really
here's the evidence.
That is exactly how you and I developed a friendship.
Yeah, we debated civilly.
That's what happened.
We took turns giving each other's side. Each one of us listened to the evidence on this side, evidence on that side. I didn't say a single personal attack to you. You didn't say a single personal attack to me. And I think that definitely the internet needs more of that, and the fitness industry needs more of that.
You know what the funny thing is when you can, I remember we had like, I don't know, it was like thousands of people ended up following that discussion between you and I, like when you and I first interacted, and everybody ultimately, like I had some people attacking me at first because they felt like they were coming to your defense. And that's fine. Like I just ignored it, and you and I just continued on with the respectful dialogue. But ultimately, people ended up coming in and chiming in, and it was kind of like back in the days when we had really good discussion boards, and there was a lot of just really good like a high level, like there was quality discussion that ended up manifesting from that interaction. But as long as the two people who started it maintain respect in the course of the dialogue and interactions, it seems like what happens, and you just kind of ignore the trolls and the assholes. What happens is kind of like what I was talking about earlier. The people who want to be involved in something that's constructive, healthy, engaging, educational, they will gravitate towards that as the other people kind of make their way out when they see they're not getting any action. And that's what ended up happening. We had a lot of people come in, and multiple people say, at the time, it was pretty funny. It's like, this is the most civil debate I've ever seen about a dietary topic online ever. And it was like, I don't know, I remember it was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments just for over the course of the evening. Because I remember your post at the time when you made it. It was like, hey, Paul, get over here. Like, we already been friends, but somehow you were able to tag me, and you're like, get over here and let's discuss this topic. I'm like, okay. So we had the discussion. But you're right. It's like we don't see enough of that. And I'll tell you why I think that happens is that a lot of times, especially for people who have not cultivated enough areas of their life outside of, say, just the fitness industry, they create this very strong attachment to their identity to the fitness aspects they believe in, whether it's training or diet or whatever. So when you attack that particular ideology or paradigm, it feels like a personal attack to them. And a lot of people cannot separate the discussion between, let's discuss a topic or an ideology or a principle or a value from who they are. So if somebody comes and says, like, because Scott and I both, we like very similar training systems. It's like, well, low volume, high intensity training is stupid. They're saying, a lot of people will take that and say, you're saying I'm stupid because I believe that, and that's an ideology, right? Scott knows what I'm talking about. That's an ideology I strongly ascribe to. If you can separate yourself from that, and that's one of the things that the 4 agreements goes over, is don't take anything personally. Separate yourself from, say, this guy, what he's really saying is, or whether he said it or not, he's really saying he just doesn't agree with my training. And you and I, Alan, we had a conversation. You can't change people's minds by coming at them hard in the paint, challenging them directly. They'll double down on their ideological viewpoint about what it is they believe, and then that's when the friction starts, right? You have to get them to understand in some kind of way your perception, your viewpoint, and why you feel that way. And it comes back to, it's kind of like when you have a conversation. So it's like, Alan, let's say you and I had a problem. And this is one of the things I like to give to people is, let's say you and I had a problem and I come to you and I use a lot of yous. Like, this is one of the things I've talked to Scott about this many times. He knows what I'm talking about here, but he uses a lot of yous. And I say, listen, man, you really pissed me off. You know, the way that you treated me about XYZ, just, you know, you're just kind of a fucking asshole and blah, blah, blah. Now, the way that might make you feel, in contrast to me coming and saying, listen, I feel kind of upset because I found out that, you know, you spoke these things. And what I really just need from you is to talk to me about if you said those things, why you feel that way. Now, if I approach you with that, what I'm asking you is I'm saying, hey, I feel this particular way. Connect with me here on what it is that's bothering me. And that feels very different than the former way, right? Mm-hmm. We can apply that every single day in every relationship that we have, instead of saying, if you respected me, then you would do blah, blah, blah. That's one of the ones I constantly get from people when they come to me and they ask about their relationship problems. And they say, if they show me something that they said or their significant other said, it'll be a lot of, if you respected me, then you would do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all of that is very dysfunctional language, because a more functional and healthy way to look at your partner and say, I feel very disrespected because these things happen. What I really need from you right now is to let me know that you're sorry, that you apologize to me, and to assure me that it's not going to happen anymore. So when I come to you and I say that feels very connective, right? Like, that feels totally different than me saying, you're really an asshole, you know that? And you did this to me and you did that and whatever. Because now you feel attacked and you're like, okay, I got to defend myself. Now I'm going to go on the attack a little bit, and I'm going to try to use logic and principle. And that's another thing. It's like when you're having an emotionally laced conversation that's full of conflict, you throw logic and facts right out, because what it's really supposed to be about is understanding the other person's perception about why they feel that particular way. It's not about logic and facts. And if you've ever had a conversation with an upset female, you'll know that this shit is true, because you could have this shit out in math and physics on the board and say, when X, Y happened, then this is what manifested from that. And then the angle, the 90-degree angle of that over here was this and that. Okay, but it's not going to matter because she feels a particular way. So one thing I want to give guys on this is, if your girl's upset at you, don't try to use facts. Actually sit back and try to understand her perception about why it is that she feels a particular way. But we can all give each other that as human beings in the relationships you have, whether they're professional, whether they're friendships, whether they're romantic relationships or whatever, is the second you're able to take a step back and express that you feel a particular way because something happened, why you felt that way, and what you need from the other person, you're saying, what I'm asking you to do is connect with me on this problem. And then it's far more inviting for the other person to open up and have a genuine conversation with you. So how that applies into what all you were saying, Alan, is that if we can do a good job of stopping, not only just attacking people, but when we feel attacked, not taking it personally, and understanding that, hey, let's make this about debating a particular nutrition idea or a training idea or whatever, and say, hey, I feel like you're attacking me as a person rather than this idea. What I'd really like from you, though, is to be open discussing this idea in a constructive way that we can benefit from and other people can too.
You know, the nature of the fitness industry and the kind of people it attracts, I think it makes it extra difficult for people to think about the other person across the table that they're debating with or arguing with or shitting on or whatever. I think that the fitness industry, but without a doubt, attracts a lot of narcissists, a lot of people with a lot of insecurities, and a lot of just generally superficial people. And I was able to.
It's a physical culture, right?
Yeah, it's a physical culture and just highly superficial, and you never know the true depth of your relationships with people in the fitness industry. I found out recently that the depth of my relationships boiled down to maybe like half a dozen people, and I thought I had some deep, meaningful relationships with like a few hundred. Well, maybe not that much, but it's just really interesting how deceptive it is in this industry and the relationships that are built and just how fragile that those relationships really are. And I think that part of it is just because of the kind of folks that the fitness industry attracts. So that's a hypothesis of mine. I haven't ran a randomized controlled trial on that one, but
yeah, you're not even in academia anyway, so it wouldn't.
I'm not an academic. I'm
right.
not an academic.
I don't know what you're.
Unless you work at a university, it's not worth reading your shit.
Right.
Well, as someone who was in academia, you run into the same things there. In every industry I've been in, you run into the same
people. Wait, hold
on,
Scott. You actually were in academia.
Yeah.
So we just want to know.
So wait a minute, Scott. You're not an academic right now.
No.
Are you working at a university?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Okay, so you're ex-academia, buddy.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I know. I mean, I'm not gonna. The details aren't important, but my experience, having been in a tenure track position, and then when I left that, when I literally, it's funny that none of the details really matter, but at one point in time, I had just technically stepped away from my position, not in the way that would have affected my competence to take care of any tasks related to something I would have been asked to do, but simply it was a purely political thing. I was no longer in my position, so I was just kind of excommunicated. In a very, it was obviously, I don't want to say what it was. It doesn't really matter so much, but it's like, oh, you're no longer in this position, then you don't know anything. All of a sudden, your opinion is just for naught. And in the way that people have sort of they've taken your level of expertise and sort of just thrown it out the door because you don't have a particular label, you don't have a particular job or position. Literally, I had that job and position and gone through all those things for years and years and years, 10, 12 years, what have you. And then literally when someone finds out that I'm no longer technically an academic, so to speak, I'm on sabbatical actually at the time. I'm no longer valid. Like I've completely lost my credibility. So, and that's how it is. And I saw that in a personal conversation. In fact, interesting is another side topic. I was speaking with someone in a group of people, and this was a professor who was starting to want to move into an area that was my area of expertise and had been for a while. That literally, legitimately, I probably knew more about than he did at the time. He was sort of like thinking about, maybe we'd try something like this. And my opinion was just thrown out the door, so out the window. It's like you no longer know anything. Like all of a sudden, because you don't have this title, you've been stripped of all your knowledge and your credibility and what have you. So that's just how it is. Like imagine you worked on the stock exchange. You've been there for 20 years and you lose your job. I think that's a pretty cutthroat world. My uncle was a stockbroker. My cousin did it for a while. They're pretty hardcore people. You don't have your license anymore. Then why should I listen to you? So I did it for 20 years, but that's just human nature. That's the way in which people tend to behave with one another. It's you've been knocked from your perch, and you're no longer what you once were simply because of that fact. Irrespective of what you've been through previously to that. So, yeah, just human people, just people being people.
Yeah, what that comes back to is everybody has different value systems, and I talk about this quite a bit, is different value systems and metrics assigned to those value systems, right? So somebody might, look at me and say, well, you've never accomplished anything extraordinary, whatever, because their value systems are based on either, say, education, or they're based on, say, having certain certifications or stuff like that. Whereas another person, they might say, well, you've accomplished, a whole bunch of these things, or, you're very accomplished because, you've given all, you've taught all these seminars, you've written all these articles, you have competed in all these different, in powerlifting and bodybuilding, and you've done all these other things. But it all depends on what you value. Mm. It all depends on what you value, not only just in yourself, and that tends to be how people measure things a lot of times as well, right? Like we tend to teach people how we want them to love us because that's how we love, right? So it's the same kind of principle, is that whatever it is that we value, because that gives us meaning in our life, that comes back to the community thing, so we're full circle. We tend to see other people, and if they are very well accomplished in what it is that we're striving for, we're very well accomplished in, we gravitate towards that because we place that on a high value. And if somebody else is achieving in a completely different way, then we might look at that through a different lens and say, well, they're not as accomplished, or their stuff they're doing doesn't mean as much, because in my value system, that's irrelevant. And that's why you see a lot of these hierarchies like that, because like some people are completely like, I don't care about studies and I don't care about what they saw from 32 guys who were in college, that are often doing leg extensions for 4 sets 3 times a week or whatever, because they value somebody who puts a lot of guys on stage or a lot of women on stage and gets results, right? So they don't care. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong. It all comes back to what it is that you value and why you value that. And rather than us being able to separate those terms and look at it, in those guidelines, what we tend to do is say, well, I value this. So if somebody else doesn't value it, they're an idiot. And we do that a lot. All of us are guilty of that. All of us are completely guilty of that. Instead of, and Alan comes back to your number one point, is the dogmatism that creates this internal dogmatism to say, I'm not willing to expand, grow. And the other thing I talked about is our relationships that tend to become transformational and grow as and expand us, because we say, no, here's my value systems. Let me cling onto them, hold on to those real tight. And anybody that challenges those, I'm like this right here. So that's how we tend to operate internally a lot of times. And that is what will keep us in kind of that shell. Like John Gottman, who's it's the man, I talk about him a lot. He has this really famous video that he talks about lobsters. And lobsters they grow, right? They have this soft body underneath their shell, right? So when they start growing, they get really uncomfortable and they have to go hide somewhere to protect themselves from predators. And then they can shed that shell and grow a new one. Well, a lot of times when our views or the things that we believe in and ascribe to, when they get challenged, that's it's a type of adversity. And it gives us an opportunity, if we would like for it to grow out of the shell that we're currently existing in, either emotionally, fundamentally, mentally, wherever. And it gives us an opportunity to grow into a larger shell if we'll allow it. The problem is, we as humans don't tend to like to have makes us feel very uncomfortable. And one of the things I know from my own internal work is, like, when somebody's challenged me in a way, they're not just being an asshole, but they're challenging me in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable. That should give me pause for thought to step back and say, maybe there's an area in my life right here I have an opportunity to grow in. Mm-hmm. And if people looked at that uncomfortableness in that way, they would do a lot more growing and a lot less fighting and bickering. But I think that we're still going to have cliques, and I think we're still going to have warlords, and there's going to be warlords over different cliques and lead the way and stuff like that. And I could pretty much go down the list and name all the warlords of the various cliques, but I'm not going to do that today.
Well, it's. Sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Well, go. I mean, Mother Nature and the aspects of evolutionary biology have sort of equipped us in a way that, well, first we're going to have to protect ourselves. We have an ego, so we don't want to be challenged. Right. And then we want to have some tribalism. We want to have some connectedness amongst those who are like us, genetically like us. So we have a tribe. Let's say in our tribe, we value people who are very well equipped, very well. They're artists. So we're going to ascribe to all the notions and the things that are involved in our tribe, so that will then allow our genetics to be propagated into the future. So being connected and being locked into a particular philosophy and sociological perspective is built into us because it's part of propagating our genetics forward into the future. It's like it's just sort of the way that nature has sort of devised us, if you think of it in that way. So it's a tough thing to go and say, you know what? Those artists who really valued like being able to have like this really amazing way of blending colors in to create a three-dimensional image on a two-dimensional flat surface, that's really miraculous, and I can understand why they'd see that as being really pretty cool, even though my greatest value in my tribe is someone who can figure out when to plant seeds and how to fertilize the soil and blah, blah, blah. So you have someone who's like, I've spent 40 years in the gym and figuring shit out in the trenches, banging away at the weights, etc. And that's what I've done with my life. And they say, well, you're just fucking sitting there behind your desk as a researcher, like trying to like plug away at these things. I know some people in academia who are fucking hardcore. I've seen some workers, some major fucking, and I know you know some of these people too, Alan. Some of these people, I mean, they'll push. They can push themselves. The people who to going through tenure, the process to get tenure to become a full professor is brutal. It's brutal. I tell you what. I mean, and I can say this just because having been on both sides of the fence, I've done a PhD and I've also done a bodybuilding competition. And bodybuilding competitions are a breeze compared to doing a PhD. Walk in the park. Bodybuilding competitions aren't easy. Not easy to do. But doing some of those things in academia are really tough. But it's hard to see that from the other side of the coin. And it's that orientation. So we're going to have to be compassionate and empathetic and do all this kind of shit that runs counter to what really, for basically all of history, has been what it meant to be human. We're going to have to become, superhuman. And Ubermensch, you're going to use, I'll throw some German at you. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to learn how to do something different. Otherwise, eventually the world's going to become too small, and we're going to become bickering warlords who destroy ourselves with the weapons of our own mass destruction.
First of all, I think that's really interesting that from your perspective, getting a PhD is tougher than doing a bodybuilding show. I know a few people who would say the opposite of that. But, I respect where you're coming from because, after all, you survived the Waco burn down. And who else does that?
Right.
It got jacked out on the other side of it.
Right. You not only survived it, but you just got super.
Yeah.
You just gained 60 pounds of muscle and lost like half your body fat. But here's what I don't like to see amongst bodybuilding veterans, competitive veterans, and guys with generally a high level of intelligence, but their reasoning kind of goes off and they start crossing the streams. Like I give you an example. I saw a couple of videos, like a video series that George Farah made. He posted on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, the bro science stuff.
And it's like, okay, it's totally valid for him to say, I helped X, Y, and Z top 5 pro succeed. Because in my experience, this is what worked. And dude, that is valid. Nobody can mess with that. Nobody can touch that. But when he starts justifying with science that is incorrect and incomplete and 30 years old, that's when the issues come in, and that's when the evidence-based dudes and the research nerds come in and say, "Oh, you're totally wrong on that. What you're saying is totally false." When all Farah had to do is say, I'm not sure if this has been rooted out in the peer-reviewed literature or not. I don't really know whether it's even possible to test these sort of things, but this is my method this is what I did with Kai Green, and look at the results. Are you going to listen to that? Well, dude, observation is huge, right?
Yeah.
Success will always leave clues. Mm-hmm. But the minute you start saying, and the reason we did this is to keep insulin at bay, because insulin is a fat storing hormone, and da 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 blah 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 blah. And then of course, people are injecting insulin and getting shredded, but never mind that. That's when I start having the issues with these guys who are extremely successful in the trenches. I think I even heard Milos Sarcev start bro sciencing out. No, just say, this is what I did, and it works like a motherfucker. So listen close. This is what I did. I'm all in.
Wait, hold on, Alex. I want to expand on that, because I've said before.
I love this topic.
Yeah, I said before, I was like, listen, for not everybody out there, not everybody out there, if some guy is doing something and it's getting the results that he wants from his clients over and over and over again, he doesn't always need to understand all the fucking mechanisms behind it. And I got it. I'm not going to say who. I'm going to break my own rule. I'm not going to say who. But I remember saying years before, I said, it doesn't fucking matter. I said, if you want to know the mechanisms behind it, then fine, go look at it. I said, but if you're popping out client after client after client, they're killing it results-wise, just keep doing what you're doing, because some coaches do have an intuition about what to do with their clients to help get them better, whether it's strength training or athletic training or just.
I'll throw out a name, Chris Aceto. He does that too. The guy's amazing as dude. He's one of the best coaches to ever freaking put on a coaching hat. But then he starts bro sciencing. I'm like, dude, just slow down. Just tell us what you did that worked. I love that. Don't justify it.
Okay, but here's the other problem. Here's the problem with the evidence-based side.
I have a third perspective when you're done with this, Paul.
And then there's a third sex. There's a third sex, like in Thailand.
Exactly. So a lot of times the evidence-based guys will go in and they'll attack those guys. Even if they're not saying like the bro science stuff, they'll just say, you don't have to do that because whatever. And these motherfuckers haven't developed anybody. I'm like, you ain't done shit, dude. Why are you fucking mouth? Right. Like, you've developed no one. You've got nobody shredded. You put muscle on nobody. You're just spouting shit you read off a fucking abstract. And because, you're like this card-carrying member of, like I'm riding this guy's jock who claims, like he's an evidence-based guy. I see that shit too. So it's like it's the two sides end up fighting, because you got one guy over here that is consistently producing all the time in real life over and over and over again. Like Dave Puccianella has been like attacked by I don't know how many people because of his 6 foods that work, but that motherfucker gets people shredded every time.
I love that 6 foods that work thing. Right? It's not some of the best entertainment ever. I love it.
But here's the thing about the quote unquote 6 foods that work. Like if you literally just gave those people those 6 foods, they're going to get in shape, right? Like they're going to get in shape. So the thing is, debating the nuances often leads to more fracturing of the knowledge that could be shared, because there's so many people who cling to evidence-based stuff that don't coach, but they like to go out and sound sciencey and be sciencey. Like, I'm not going to go back to like Greg Nichols has started writing about fat loss at one point. The guy's like a fat little turd ball. Like, he doesn't need to be writing about anything to do with fat loss. I don't give a fuck how many studies he's read or anything to do peer reviewed. Like, there's some things you really have to do and experience before you're going to open your mouth about them, or at least develop other people in those particular areas. Shigo was never a great power lifter, right? But he developed so many great power lifters that the guy can talk about what he wants to fucking talk about when it comes to developing strength athletes. So, and you take like Chris Aceto was actually funny that you mentioned him, was one of the guys I think of. That dude, if somebody's working under Aceto, they get in shape, they get shredded, they show up in shape for the show.
Everybody, if like somebody's top 5 or top 4, whatever, and they just fail with everybody, shove them over to Chris, and holy shit.
I think I heard that, what's his name, Ramey's back was like Aceto again now too. So like when he showed up in his best shape.
That was a bad rumor. I think they addressed that on Arts.
Okay, well, anyway, my point is like there's certain guys that rise to the top because they consistently produce high level guys. Yeah. It doesn't fucking matter if they know all the mechanisms behind it. And that's when, because like I said, I work as the conduit between the two. So when I see a guy like that, like an Aceto or a Fair or whatever, that are producing, especially like I said, like with Aceto, like consistently producing all these guys, I'm like, he knows what he's fucking doing, guys. It doesn't matter if he's 100% spot on with the mechanisms behind it. The point is, he knows from doing this for decades and decades how to get guys in shape. So instead of being an asshole, and since you've never developed anybody and you've never gotten your fat ass in shape and you're debating all this stuff about why it works with the mechanism, why don't you just go learn what it is Chris is doing somehow? Like, say, what is it that you can learn about? How do you understand, like, when to, like, take carbs out or put carbs in? Like, what's the intuition that he's figured out in kind of that rhythm of looking at guys' physiques change? There's something in there intuitively that he knows to do. Now, whether or not it's to do because of insulin this or because of cortisol that or whatever, the truth is it's irrelevant. He's consistently producing. And so,
hear me out here. So imagine this.
This is the third one. This is the third
one. So imagine this. I'm a tenure track professor in California. I've been entrenched in Western science. Show me the data, blah, blah, blah. And I decided I want to go do some other things. And I start going to acupuncture school. They start talking about qi and yin and yang and fire and blood. Not blood, but shui blood. It's the whole other thing.
I got some questions for you about this.
It's a conceptual paradigm that has led for thousands of years acupuncturists to come up with a functional way of treating people with a holistic form of medicine that's been around, that's been proven effective in many, many, many circumstances. And you can look at that literature. And none of that shit is necessarily measurable. There's some interesting stuff when it comes to like measuring conductance along the meridians in the skin that doesn't seem to be explained by anatomical structures. So there might be something going on there. But like all these like yin and yang and the different body fluids and yin and yang and all that kind of shit, it's a conceptual paradigm. The reason I bring that up is that when we're figuring things out, when we're coming up with patterns, we're basically connecting the players on a chessboard in some way, shape, or form. We're connecting the dots and building this paradigm of thought, of way to connect things. And that's what Chinese medicine is. It's a conceptual paradigm. It doesn't necessarily have materialistic relevance in a way that can be measured the way a Western scientist or a physicist would, per se. And I always liken that to like Newtonian physics, the laws of motion. We can put rockets into spaces and that shit, but people who are true physicists might say, well, actually quantum mechanics is a better explainer of the nature of reality, or string theory, or whatever it may be. But Newtonian mechanics has its role. It has utility, just like the paradigm of Chinese medicine, which has been developing for thousands of years, has its utility. So now fast forward to the future here, and we've got bodybuilding bro scientists who are badass coaches. and they need to develop a conceptual paradigm for how shit works. Where do they get their ideas? Well, if they start saying, well, it's not insulin, it's the Farrah factor, because of the Farrah factor, that's why it happens, and like they'll be thinking you're fucking crazy. So the only thing that only hooks that they have to put their concepts on to come up with somebody to explain the phenomena that they're seeing is Western science, but they're not trained in Western science well enough to know that when they talk about some insulin-related effect, that they're talking bullshit. Like, that's not really like the whole growth hormone thing that Farrah used to say, like, you don't want to eat because you're I can't remember what he said. He was so bizarre. Like, there's all this weird shit. I don't even, those things, I blocked them out of my head because I don't even want those ideas, polluting my mind. I'm serious. I try to forget that shit because it's so fucked up sometimes.
Because later down the line when you start talking, you'll mix that shit in there.
I don't want to do that. Like, get that out of there. Like, oh God, get that off of there. Like,
it's not right at all.
I know.
Said that.
So that's the thing. And of course, now we also got the pressure bringing back to social media. People like to hear some sciencey shit. They want to hear you be able to explain what you're saying. So you're shooting yourself in the foot to a certain degree if you say, I know this works because I've done it with 100 clients. I don't know how it works. I haven't got a clue. I figured it out.
There's nothing wrong with saying that.
Well, there is in many people's minds, because it introduces some doubt and it makes you seem like you don't know what you're doing. And I think literally, when you're figuring those things out, you're trying to why would this work? It's like, well, insulin stores fat. Okay, yeah, it's probably an insulin. I don't know much about it. It's probably insulin. So you hang your hat on that concept, even though you don't really understand the concept.
Well,
and then you have this false insulin concept that becomes rooted in your head, just like yin and yang, two different aspects of chi. Yin and yang, like those things are so highly developed in that literature, but you would be able to measure those things in any material way. Like you wouldn't necessarily measure someone's yin deficient and their body temperature goes up. They'll feel hotter, but you won't see like literally that if you measured their esophageal or their rectal or sublingual temperature, that there'd be a difference in the yin deficient person necessarily. So that's where that happens. So now 10 years down the road, you got someone who has 100,000 followers, and they've been proven, to be a hell of a coach, and they hung their hat on that false insulin concept, and now they believe their own hype. So that's how I think that stuff comes into being, and that's what bro science become. That's the origin of bro science. It's fucked up science, but it's the closest thing to an explanation of what happens. And here's what I think is really important. Is that if you scientists sat down with the total bro scientist or the in the trenches guy and said, okay, would you agree with me that we live in the same world together? Like whatever is dictating how reality manifests is the same for you, is the same for me. We're not going to get too deep here. So your science should be able to explain shit if it's really, really good. And my way of digging in should be able to explain if it's really, really good. Basically, it's the same fucking phenomenon. How can we fucking argue about this? Like, because your science should be able to figure out, and so should the bro science. And
I think we should come up with a scale of bro science, like 1 to 5 bro science. Like a 5 bro science means pretty fucking close. Like, right? Like it's not exact.
Right. That's a good speculation there. Yeah.
Fair, like the fair thing where it's like you don't do whatever for some GH, this massive GH relation. Like, no, dude, that's not even fucking, that doesn't exist at all. That's like a 1 bro science. Like a 5 bro science is, dude, it's not 100%, but you're close. It's like,
some people are really trying to understand, and they mix some things up, and some of it makes sense. You can see the logic there, and then sometimes people are just like, they're just tossing out scientific terms to get head nodding,
Right. Like I have a personal anecdote about it too. Is like, and I've hit on this one multiple times before. Is if you do the research on say chromium picolinate, right? Like if you do for a while there, chromium picolinate was said as a supplement, was touted as a supplement that would aid in weight loss. And I don't know how I say what.
That's way back, man. That's like 20 years.
Exactly. Dude, I go way back, brother. So like I had this massive, I don't even know how I came about it because I clearly wasn't trying to lose weight, but I had this massive like thing of chromium picolinate. It was Weeders. It was really big. So I just decided to start taking handfuls of it every morning. Well, I didn't even think about it, right? And I was training, this would have been like 96 or 97. I was in the military. I started getting leaner and leaner and leaner and leaner. And I was like, my weight's just dropping on the scale. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And my diet hasn't changed. Nothing's happened. And one morning I get up and because I was taking like 10, 15, 20 chromium picolinates in the morning. Like I was just trying to go through this giant thing of it because I had these supplements I brought with me out to San Angelo that's where I was stationed at the time. And I was just taking these. And after weeks, I realized one morning, I still remember this. I got up and I was taking like 15. I go, holy shit, that's the only thing I've changed is I started taking these massive amounts of chromium picolinate. But if you look at all the studies on chromium picolinate, it all says it's fucking worthless for fat loss. But if you have a potential, say if I was deficient, right, in chromium, or there was some mechanism where that it helped facilitate better nutrient partitioning and better insulin sensitivity for whatever reason, like it's possible that there's some mechanism that happened in me taking these massive amounts of chromium picolinate that facilitated fat loss. So I remember like reading years later that like, it's just total bunk. But this happened every time I ever like mega loaded with chromium picolinate for weeks at a time. Every time.
And here's the thing. If you look at that literature and compare, did anyone do the 150 grams of chromium picolinate that Paul Carter did in any of those studies?
No.
Probably, I don't know how much you did.
That's the thing. It was considered bunk.
So what happened in your reality and what happened in the reality of those research studies, it's the same fucking reality. Right. So then you say, well, let's look at the actual literature. Let's fucking dig in and read the studies. And like, it's 5 grams a day. It's 10 grams, 15 grams. It's Paul Carter. holy shit, like, okay, Paul had diarrhea, his appetite was reduced. Like, it could be a whole bunch of things.
I didn't have those things, Scott.
But whatever. Like, maybe you did, maybe you did. I don't know. I don't know how much you took. But and also, were you in those studies? Like, there's really no way that I can come up with where all of a sudden there's the Paul Carter reality where chromium picolinate just has totally different physiological effects for you and anyone else in your universe. It's not the Marvel universe; it's the L. Paul Carter universe, and the universe that's
all I know is
there has to be some.
Here's the thing. Let's say I did this, and let's say I started using clients, and I was megadosing clients on chromium picolinate, and they all saw an accelerated degree of fat loss once they put this in there. But then you have all the studies, like then we don't have any, and that's kind of the point, is where the bro science guys and the evidence guys really can help each other out. And I think that if you think of it this way, all basically what we call the one thing I think we've done a good job of is acknowledge that the science that we're always talking about is a soft science. Scott's really big on making sure to drive this point home, is that it's more like a guideline. It's like a guideline. So like here's kind of what we see. So this is kind of a guideline. It's not like hard facts. It's not a hard science like Scott used physics earlier, and that's the hard science. But when we're talking about training methodologies, or we're talking about nutrient timing or whatever, it's more like guidelines that we're giving people. And here's the one thing I try to get across to people. You're going to have to try this shit. That's the one part that drives me fucking nuts. I'm like, instead of debating over it, go try it. Do it for 2 months, and then get back with me and say, this was my experience with it. That's how you really learn. It's like, even when the stuff's out there, put it into action for yourself and then see what the result is.
Yeah. There's a huge glutamine love affair in the 80s and 90s. And over the subsequent decade, there was like maybe 4 or 5 studies showing that glutamine didn't do crap in terms of muscle gain or strength or improvements in body composition, fat loss.
What did it end up showing?
And here's the thing. I think that the disconnect between the glutamine love affair versus the study results could have been genuinely that glutamine doesn't do shit, or the people who were using glutamine use enough of it to heal up gut issues.
Right.
And so that would translate to better nutrient utilization and then better gains. So in the research studies, they didn't use nearly only a fraction of the glutamine doses that the glutamine lovers were using.
4 times the amount.
Yeah, dude. And so, there's still kind of an open-ended answer about glutamine, the conditionally essential amino acid. And I think that maybe the mechanism might be more having to do with its effect on healing the gut and indirectly facilitating gains.
That was it. That was the fair when he brought up I think it was like a month or so ago, he was talking about glutamine.
Oh, did he? I didn't know Farrah brought that up.
Okay, somebody brought up glutamine like a month ago and said, because it's the most abundant amino acid in the body, and it's responsible for all of these mechanisms involved in all of them. That's why glutamine. I think it was Farrah.
Look at L-carnitine.
L-carnitine.
L-carnitine. I mean, for so long, L-carnitine, like, the studies don't seem to be showing anything. And then Paul Greenhalgh's lab, Stevens et al., comes out with studies showing that if you supplement with enough for long enough, you do actually increase the body stores of L-carnitine, and you can shift fat use during exercise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that
that's
insulin
a real new one, right? That's really
it's not even that new. It's like it's maybe 4 or 5 years old now. Stevens, Stephens. It's from Paul Greenhalgh's lab. And carnitine is loaded in the same way. It's kind of interesting, like insulin loads carnitine. So that's how, like, a lot of bodybuilders now are using L-carnitine. They're injecting L-carnitine and using it with insulin, which you'd think, well, why the hell are you going to do that? Because insulin inhibits lipolysis. But insulin actually helps load the carnitine into the muscle cells. And so the same way that the creatine and Greenhalgh did a lot of the.
And that's what I mean. It's like the bodybuilders are the one out there in the trenches figuring all this weird shit out.
They're like, I'm going to buy fucking 95 pounds of L-carnitine. I'm going to take it for the next year. I don't give a fuck, along with everything else. And so it was like those studies were like 4 months long. They were the long studies that Stevens did. and with pretty large amounts of carbohydrate. And they actually dug into the mechanisms and looked at carnitine uptake and that kind of stuff. I can send them to you, Alan. But it's pretty cool stuff. But that took decades to come out finally. It took a long time for that evidence to sort of make its way. And now tons of people are using okay, you want to get shredded for a show, clenbuterol, growth hormone, L-carnitine. Those are going to be in the top 5 for guys. Ephedrine. But a lot of people are using L-carnitine now. So, and you can get it various places. In fact, it's used if you go. I mean, we're going to give away some of the secrets here, but if you go some of the veterinary places, like the stuff they use for equine performance, like AMP and L-carnitine and some of that kind of shit, they don't give a rat's ass about the horse's health. Kind of like a lot of bodybuilders.
You should save this for the seminar. You should save the secrets.
Yeah, the secrets. But some of that stuff, you can buy that, on the veterinary side.
And here's the thing about this is there's lots of little things like this that are shared in kind of the bodybuilding inner circles that really do work, that there's no peer-reviewed research to support it, but it consistently works over and over and over again.
And it's paralleled in the underground of horse racing, where they're giving those horses everything they can. They'll burn them out 2 or 3 years. It's one horse. They give them $20,000 worth of injections, and that horse makes $2 million in the races or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. They're horrible, those animals. I mean, I'm not at all for it, but it's an extreme circumstance because they care less about the animals than even bodybuilders would care about themselves when it comes to getting the trophy. So you can buy L-carnitine's been for sale for a long, long, long time on some of those equine sites. And so that's an example, that where the literature just wasn't matching what was happening in the trenches. And so you'll have the people who say, well, the literature doesn't support it. It's well, let's look past the abstracts. Let's not be an abstract scientist. Let's look and see how long was it given? What was the variability amongst individuals? You see a mean and a standard deviation. But what is that? Assuming normalcy of the distribution there's probably some outliers. Maybe those 3 or 4 guys who are getting an effect from glutamine or supplement X are the people who would have been outliers in the short-term studies where there was not a power analysis done initially. And I'm talking sciencey intentionally here because this is the sciencey shit that people who aren't trained in science might not know about, that are the limitations that sometimes scientists themselves don't even take into consideration. You can shoot yourself in the foot if you haven't done a power analysis to make sure that you've got a large enough study sample, you've got fine enough reliability in your measurements, and you've got long enough to give an effect size that you can actually pick up on statistically. So at the end of the day, you can say that whatever your intervention was did or didn't work. You can do really crappy science. It's unfortunate, you don't see a tomato meter, like they do for movies or what have you, next to the abstract that says, this was ranked. There's impact factors for journals and those sorts of things too. And scientists know this was a prestigious journal. This was a good study. I trust in this. But your average person, who might be the Journal of Scientific Bamboozlement, thinks that's the same as the Journal of Biological Chemistry, and they don't know the difference. So there can be lots of crappy science that people could cite and look at and not really have an understanding of that might refute what someone is seeing in the real world. And those things are still happening in the same universe.
Like guys that make training routines based off EMG studies.
Yeah, you're digging those EMG studies. What are the limitations? We covered that one before. Exactly. So, you just...
you said that, though, because we were on the phone that day, and I was like, but it's not fucking science, guy. You're like, it's science. It's just shitty science.
There can be shitty science. Right. You just got to know what the good stuff is from the bad stuff. And that's where a good... that's what you're trying to do, Paul. That's what I'm trying to do. I think what Alan's trying to do is say, you know what? Let's look at what the science really tells us. How close is it to being truly practically applicable? Is there statistical significance or is there practical significance here? Let's be critical consumers of the science and use it.
Such a great point about you emphasize that a lot, which I always appreciate, is that, and Alan, you have too, is that you have to look at the practical application of how it was used and understand whether or not it's something that's feasible for the average person to be using in the real world, right? Mm-hmm. And that's I tend to look way more at the training studies, and more often than not, when these get tossed around as using as science and fact and proof, okay, guys, did you even look at the fucking training routine that was used in the study? Are you going to train that way? Like, if you're not, then throw it out. It doesn't even apply. So look, you have to understand, like, is this practical? Can it be used by the everyday person? Is it going to be used by you? So if you don't want to know if something has practical application to you, then actually look and say, is this something I'm going to do in my training or my nutrition or whatever, those kind of things? Because if you know right out of the gate, you dig into it and say it's not something I'm going to apply, throw it away. And it doesn't mean that it's worthless. It just means like it's worthless to you. It has no value to your everyday life and application of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a big roadblock to hashing those things out online is that people feel the license to just take pot shots. If there was like a block against just taking personal shots, then we would hash out a lot of these things online, because the minute somebody starts getting name called, they shut down, they get out of the discussion.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's like it becomes attack on the person, and then you're not debating the topic. Yeah. I think it is kind of miraculous when I look back, even like I said, how you and I started, that I think we debated for hours on end, and there was never a single personal attack that happened over the course of debating back and forth over something as simple as carbohydrates, which then begs us to question how ridiculous it is that we get into such long, drawn-out personal fights with people over something like apples. Like, you motherfucker, how dare you say a good post-workout the recovery food? Yeah. And that was what's funny. I always laugh about that because it comes back to Alan took offense by the fact that I said I don't think fruit's a great choice for glycogen resynthesis post-workout. He's like, I don't necessarily agree with that. And that was literally kind of the heart of everything. And by that.
It's a cool discussion, man. And even when we, obviously in a future episode, I mean, dude, it's amazing how fast the time goes by. But we can talk about pre-exercise, during exercise, and post-exercise carbohydrate and protein and or free amino acid feedings. And I bet you each one of us is going to have either a drastically different take or a subtly different take. But dude, I'm going to listen the shit out of both what you guys say of your around workout nutrition stuff, because that's the spirit of being scientific. You open your mind. What is Paul doing for his around workout or his peri-workout nutrition? What is Dr. Koresh doing for his intra-workout nutrition?
I set fire to those carbs, baby. Just burn the house down.
You have, and I know this is going to open up a can of worms. And listeners, I know we can talk forever and a day and stuff. I don't know whether we're going to get shut down by McNally or whether you guys want to stop already. But in the literature, there are limits gastrically and just also endurance performance-wise to how much carbs you can take in per hour of exercise and still be effective. And that limit seems to be right around the 80-ish gram per hour point, above which there is this, curvilinear dose-response relationship. After 80 grams, you can keep increasing the carbs, but your endurance performance will tend to suffer. But then, you have Dr. K in the gym slamming much more carbs than that per hour, I would imagine. And A, it's not endurance training. And B, he survived the Waco burn down. So who knows what he can survive in the gym.
He puts up shit he always talks about my eating, but that motherfucker goes home and does shit makes pancakes that are 2,000 2,000 calories in pancake carbs. And then he's not.
And it goes straight to the muscle. That's the thing.
It goes straight to the muscle. And then we had this discussion the other day. It's like, what did you? Because he got shredded in 3 weeks. He was already lean. He got shredded, and so I'm like, what did you change? Well, I just quit eating 18 eggs in the morning, swapped out for a shake. That's all he fucking did. And then he's still pounding a whole box of cereal after his training.
Dude, if you wrote the pancake diet, if you were a true scam artist and you wanted to just clean up real quick, just drop an ebook or whatever, you could totally do it. Just say, look at my physique. You want the pancake diet?
I have been taught by the world's foremost pancakeologist, John Meadows. We'll give John a call out. John is it's in his signature line. He's a pancakeologist.
The pancake dog.
Yeah.
They both stay lean year round. So there's got to be something to eating a shit ton of pancakes post training.
With chromium, I think they call it the insulin sensitizing factor. So there's the pancake fat burning factor that's in there. It's part of, but you have to buy the book in order to get the secret recipe.
Yeah, Johnny would always write time for some insulin bombs, and then pancakes.
Right.
So
I bet you John Meadows has tried vanadyl sulfate at very specific times.
Vanadyl sulfate that was what it was. I was thinking of it. It was one that was supposed to be increase your insulin sensitivity, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It was also supposed to create cell volumizing because of that. That was the other. It was supposed to be the combination of that, right? Increase your insulin sensitivity, so therefore you'd have better cell volumizing because it's showing all these fucking nutrients like directly into the muscle cell. I bought that too. I used that too.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't notice
alpha lipoic acid too.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I used all that shit.
That does. I found alpha lipoic acid does work actually, and they've actually used that to treat diabetes in Europe. It's actually used for glucose disposal. So
Alan's got his list. He won't deviate from his list. His list is caffeine, creatine. Hold on.
You know it, right?
Caffeine, shut up. Caffeine, creatine, beta alanine. Hold on a minute. I want to say that's it.
Yeah, performance-wise, yeah. Ergogenic-wise, but I tier supplements in, very solid, strong, like A-level evidence basis, and then the tiers go down from there in terms of their scientific evidence basis, and you can kind of choose what you want to delve into. Just kind of knowing that, okay, well, this has a ton of research backing it. This has marginal research, more of a maybe, and then you've got the prayer shot supplements.
Yeah,
and so
that's like chromium picolinate for me, right? It was like
right.
Yeah.
But guess what? You can try it
because beta alanine doesn't get the love that creatine does, right? But it's pretty much just as an effective a supplement as far as like getting in those extra reps.
Yeah.
And it's been consistently shown to do that. So it's weird that natties kind of have two really, really good supplements at their disposal all the time, and if they're not using creatine and beta alanine consistently in their training, they're really short-circuiting their process or their progress by not including those very good. Like then they go out and buy all this shit like these pre-workouts that contain like methamphetamines and stuff, and they don't have any problem finding more. Remember back when I think NO Explode actually had fucking methamphetamines in it. Right?
Do you guys remember a company called Purus Labs? Purus. I don't know. I think they had some crack in there. Like one of my clients sent me. He's all, dude, just try this. Just try this. And I said, never in my life would I ever try like crack or cocaine or something like that. And then I'm trying this Purus Labs. So it was called Muscle Marinade. Marinade.
I never even heard of it.
Wow,
it's the funniest name possible. And I'm like, shit, I just took some crack. I just broke my clean record here.
You know what's funny though? Like when I think of vanadyl and chromium and alpha lipoic acid, like when I literally the same thing as you. I had a bag. I think I just threw it out when I was remodeling my house of like a kilo of alpha lipoic acid that I bought back before you could like buy it encapsulated because we had to buy shit in bulk then. And the people, this was on like this was news groups. This is when literally Lyle McDonald was doing the Body Opus diet, Dan Duchesne's, before he wrote the ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And we were, a group of people in there who were doing cyclical ketogenic diets. And there were people who were literally, they go a whole week and they eat exactly the same, everything dead on. And then they'd add one thing to their weekend carb up. And they look at their weight, they look at their appearance, everything, like, and we were all corresponding with it, like literally logging that shit week after week after week. And that's when I first learned about alpha lipoic acid. And someone was saying, I started adding 100 milligrams to each of my meals on my carb up, and I see this, and this, and now I'm going to try 200 milligrams. I started to get a little gastric regurg. It's too acidic, blah, blah, blah. And that was the kind of thing that I was able to sort of figure out, like that alpha lipoic acid actually has an effect from.
What did you see from adding ALA in?
You tend to carb up better, and you don't hold as much water. You don't spill.
Yeah,
that was the main thing. Yeah, like so. I mean, like my guess. This is my best guess, and with the risk of sounding bro sciencey.
It's a 5 on the one.
Yeah, right.
It's a 5, bro science though. So you're all right.
So like, but I've done this so many times. So So spilling over, like, what does this mean? So when you're taking in carbohydrates and the carbohydrates are being brought in from the extravascular space to the interstitial space to the intercellular space inside the skeletal muscle.
Right.
There's a movement there from inside the vasculature to the interstitial space, which is where the water would be held, which is where you're going to see it if you spilled, into the cells. Eventually, if you fill up the glycogen, there's only so much that you can increase muscle glycogen levels. You've still got insulin increasing vascular permeability if you're carving up like a motherfucker, eating those giant pancakes or what have you.
What you do?
So you do that, and you're carving up, let's say, for a show. The way I would do it, like midweek, eventually you're going to fill your glycogen stores. You've got insulin having that effect, and that glucose is going to make its way because it has to. It's not like it just like magically snaps its fingers like David Copperfield and goes from inside the blood to inside the muscle cell. It has to make a movement. So some of it's going to end up in that interstitial space, as well as with some sodium, probably too. So you end up with osmolytes there that pull water in to the interstitial space, some of that being in the skin where you see it when someone spilled over. So if you've got something like alpha lipoic acid in there, which is helping with glycogen disposal, you're going to be able to take in more carbs without having that spilling over effect because you've got greater glycogen disposal. More of the carbs end up stored in the cell versus in that interstitial space where you would see it spilling. So that's the type of thing, like, guys are doing the same friggin' carb up, the same ketogenic diet, everything, the same number of carbs, the same foods. Because a lot of these people on this particular board, like they were treating medical things, like with their CKDs, like literally they couldn't stray they just couldn't eat whatever they wanted to, or they get fucked up. They just had food sensitivities or what have you. So they would just add that in there, like, wow, I can, I used to wake up kind of watering and like not looking all that good. I felt great from the carbs, but now I'm waking up feeling much drier. I feel fuller. I get a better pump in the gym, and I can see this consistently. Okay, now I took it out. Okay, now I'm watered over. I don't have the same pump. Try that for 2 weeks. I add it back in. Okay, in, out, in, out, in, out. I'm seeing the same effect.
They were just adding it on the carb up days.
Exactly. That's how these guys were. And Lyle can probably confirm this because he was on that board. LC Folk was on that board. Will Brink was on there, I think, a little bit maybe. He was on the miscellaneous fitness weights as well. Trying to think who else was on there.
And see, that's the kind of stuff. That's what I mean. What'll happen is, see, to me, that's like really good information. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go try that.
Empirical evidence.
I'll try it. Like, that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
And I go by my same results. That's how we used to troubleshoot things. And here, I think comes back to the disconnect that we often have is that a lot of people over in the really staunch, like evidence-based, will hear that and go, well, we've got 8 studies that look at that. And like, yeah, but I've got 97 people over here that all do this and notice the same results.
Right.
And so
it wouldn't be everybody, but many people. It won't work for everyone. That's the thing.
Right, for everybody.
Right.
And you know what I think a lot of that comes back to, and I had this conversation on a podcast that I did. We were talking about metformin is like similar to metformin, right? Like a lot of people take metformin and notice they get super full, and then other people say I don't get anything from it. And I always said my hypothesis about that was that people take metformin who already have good insulin sensitivity probably don't see anything from it. Because they already have good nutrient partitioning. They're already very good at disposing of glycogen or glucose into glycogen into the muscle cells. Whereas the other person who may be a little more potentially even insulin resistant or doesn't have as good an insulin sensitivity throws metformin in, and all of a sudden, bam! They're like, man, I'm full. I'm really tight right now. I don't have as much spillover, as much water, so forth and so on. That's why some people, like metformin is one of those things, they say, well, I'm a non-responder, responder. I'm like, nah, it's just the mechanisms. Your body doesn't need it the way somebody else who might be more insulin resistant or not as insulin sensitive as you are does.
Yeah. So, let's think of it even simpler. Something that, hold on, just quick one here. So something that people know a ton about, we talk a ton about. Let's say if you just said, I want you to do this German volume training. And you just give that to everybody. Beginners, intermediates, advanced, do German volume training, see what happens to your strength. You're Ed Cohn, you're someone who your first day in the gym. And some people would say, well, that shit doesn't work. I lost strength. Well, it's way too much if you're Ed Cohn or you're that strong. Whereas someone who's never trained before would have a totally different effect. That's obvious to everyone listening. Like if you just gave without any consideration of their training experience or their genetics or their insulin sensitivity or all those things, some standardized set
Yeah, and a lot
dosage of training or a drug or what have you, you're going to get a variability of a plethora of effects.
The other thing about that too, even from like a stimulus standpoint, a lot of people don't take into account, which is like, where were you coming from when you entered into a particular type of stimulus as far as like training goes? So if you get a guy that's doing, say, sets of endurance type, strength endurance work where he's doing sets of 25 to 30 on everything in the gym, and then he transfers over into doing sets of like 8 to 10, he's going to have more of a neural response than he's going to. Yeah,
that's all obvious. We know all that stuff, but it's like that's such an obvious topic, but we don't know about like alpha lipoic acid, the underlying things there. So we just, if it doesn't work at a standard dose, think, well, it doesn't work. That's a silly conclusion to make. Go ahead, Alan.
I think it's a really simple fix. Like when, let's say, a bro scientist like is doing like a level 4, level 3.
What level bro science is he? Like what level bro science is he?
Level 4, level 3. Like moderate bro science.
Mid-level bro
as
science.
Long as he says, okay, this is what I hypothesize, or conveys that, okay, this is what I think is happening.
Right.
I think there's a big difference between the way you present it in that way versus, okay, you guys are all freaking wrong and your shit. This is exactly what's happening and blah, 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 blah. I think that's kind of the way that George came off. I think that instead of saying, this is what I've seen and this is what I think is happening, even if he says mechanistically, I'm going to explain to you what I think is happening. I think that, and granted, nobody's really going to have a low enough ego level to do that if you're at George Farah's level. But if you just present it differently, if you just frame it differently, it's not going to sound like nails on a chalkboard to the PubMed guys, who have all the PubMed studies memorized.
We have the pro science. So we have to do the PubMed 1 to 5 level, where the one is actually the guy that believes like that it's all like hard science, that there's no room for like anything outside. Like, in other words, all anecdotes don't count. So that's like a 1, right? Like the 5 guy is like the PubMed guy that understands the real concept of evidence-based work is that it's an accumulation or culmination of saying research, what we see in the field, and all that kind of stuff. So that's like a 5-level PubMed guy, right? Does that work?
Yeah, we should rank them.
5 growth science scale, where 1 is the dude where it's like Scott was talking about earlier. Like, I don't even want that in my fucking brain.
Right.
I don't want to hear that. Like, that's like the level 1 bro science. The 5-level guy would be like a Chris Aceto, right? Like, consistently producing guys at a high level, knows what the fuck he's doing, but maybe he's not like he's close, but maybe he's not like 100%. Like he says, like, this particular thing is to do with growth hormone or insulin. But it's like you're like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't really matter because you're putting out some badass results. Let's say that's level 5 bro science.
If Chris Aceto is listening, dude, you are amazing, but you stopped reading your shit at the Nutrient Timing paperback in 2004. There's more stuff out there. We just got to incorporate that into your explanations, and you'll be like golden.
Right. Okay, but now we have to do the 1 to 5 PubMed guy. Like,
all right.
Well, hold on, before we go too far, there's a new breed of offshoot. Like, there's like a genetic variant of the bro science that I've come to see, and I'm not very happy with this mutant. These are the mutants that will put out like Instagram posts, and they will say the science says this, this, and this, and this, and this, and they will provide no citations. So you're like, and actually, Jim Stepani does that all the time. He's got a PhD.
I love
he publishes shit and puts no references.
And here's what's funny is Alan doesn't like Jim Stepani's science, and Scott doesn't like Jim Stepani's science.
It pisses me off when he does that. He knows better.
And so you got the 1 bro and we got 1 academia, 1 legitimate academia guy, and 1 fake academia guy. And then so like if all of us collectively don't like one guy's science, he kind of fucking sucks, okay? Let's just put that out there.
I called him out in an art. I think I called him out in my Beyond Bodybuilding coach, actually. But that's just you can't do that. Like when you speak with air of authority and say this is what the science says.
Stuff from Stepani, I'm like, no, dude, that's fucking wrong. He was level 4 bro science.
That can happen too.
3, possibly level 3.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like you're basically you're you need to, if you're going to say that the science says this, and you need to at least put a review or something to substantiate what your claims are.
I get these daily.
That's bullshit.
When I know a guy's bullshitting is when he says something like he's like, well, I've read studies, maybe you should too. Okay, anybody says that shit didn't read anything, right? It's just like peacocking. Because here's the thing: if you had a study, you just pop it up. You just pop it up there, right?
I mean, or just say like, look at the stuff that so and so has done, or like I'd refer you to this, or like something, you know, like. But when you just like say that this is, and I'm absolutely certain that this is the case, and you don't put anything there, and I had an interaction with someone.
That's level 1 bro science.
I guess it's like, I mean, sometimes it could be right, it could be wrong, but you don't even know, because sometimes you can say things in a generic way, and you don't know like so like what do they actually mean, and if they list the citation, then like, oh, they're referring to this phenomenon. Because that's why the citation is there, you know.
The first one's the guys that just quote the fucking abstract without actually looking at the study.
It's like
that's level 1 PubMed.
It was said in Washington D.C.
That's a level 1 PubMed guy. That's a level 1. The level 1 PubMed guy is the guy that thinks he's sciencey, but he just copy and paste the abstract, right?
Yeah,
that's level 1.
But imagine someone says, you know, it was said in Washington D.C. blah blah blah. It's like, by whom? Like,
that's what tabloid journalists do.
I know, man. It's like that's
bullshit. I have a funny story about Jim Stoppani. I actually met him in the Body Power Expo in, I believe it was 2014 or 2015, one of those. And I wanted to specifically ask him about the Extend study, the famous Extend study that never made it to publication.
You're talking about the BCAA study, right?
The BCAA study, yeah, where they used Civation Extend. And there's so much mystery.
Fuck out of that shit, didn't they?
Dude, there was so much mystery surrounding the Extend study, and people who were proponents of Extend said, look, this is a study that Stoppani et al. Did where there was a pre-existent abundance of dietary protein. They stacked Extend on top of it and saw these great results in terms of lean body mass gain and no fat gain. And so I approached Jim and I said, Jim,
that sounds fishy.
Like, Jim, this study could possibly change the game. It could certainly be a big boon for Extend sales. And I asked him, why didn't it get published? Like, what's going on? What's the holdup? And he basically tap danced around the answer to that. And let me just say, Jim Stoppani he's an instantly likable guy. If you talk to him in person, he's super gracious and humble and charming and all of that. You know, you just can't hate him if you talk to him. But dude, he just totally tap danced around the answer there. And what he did tell me was, he's like, you know, Alan, I'm done with research. We did that study in the process of me just kind of transitioning out of academia, and I just kind of didn't want to pursue the publication of it because I'm done with science and research. I'm just done with that stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, you know, because if you say you're done with research, then you you almost have to be consistent and not necessarily cite research to back your stuff up, because he was basically telling me that I'm sick of how inapplicable that the study designs are and the study subjects, and people are pumping out research saying it's going to work for the bodybuilding population, and you know, it's just really irrelevant. So I'm just done with it. And so I never really got a straight answer as to why that study never got published. I think clearly, if we just use Occam's razor here, that the simplest answer to that one is that the results of the study didn't support what they felt that it would end up supporting, so it just didn't get published.
I mean, that one's not. I mean, that's clearly not a difficult one to figure out.
Happens a lot.
This is the weird thing, man. The weird thing about that study, the data came back up. It got resurrected by Dudgeon and colleagues. They kind of took that same data and republished what appeared to be the Extend study data sets. And myself and Brad Schoenfeld and Brad Dieter, we looked at the data on that study, and it was the biggest mess ever. Nothing added up in that study. So in retrospect, I can kind of see how, well, maybe that study just never made it past peer review, because when they submitted it everywhere, it just got shot down across the board. So I'm thinking that maybe that study just never made it past peer review across a dozen journals, and then they just gave up. That's the only explanation I can think of for that.
Well, we're pushing on, I think, right at 2 hours here or more.
Oh, dude, we're pushing at 2.5.
Yeah, 2:15. Okay. 2:15.
Let's wrap up, because we were all over the board on that one. But I thought most people don't know, we usually have a preliminary call a week before the Swoley Trinity podcast, and then we try to make sure we kind of open our homework. But today we decided to roll a bit more organically and go commando style and free ball it. And that's how I roll every day anyway. So might as well figure today roll like that on the
TMI, baby, TMI.
Yes, and no, you want to know about that? You like it, and.
Dude, no wonder your butt looks so unimpeded during the workouts. I'm looking at your big old glutes. I'm like, man, Paul's glutes look really amazing. And now I know why. You just don't wear underwear.
Yeah, that's just, you're actually seeing my butt. You're seeing my glutes. Like there's no padding. Like I'm not wearing some Lululemon motherfuckers. So like that's my glutes. Damn it, they're big.
That's awesome.
Paul just got 1,000 new Instagram followers. Next 5 seconds.
You can't miss my butt, man. So we freeballed it today, and we actually didn't get into some of the other things. I think for next week we kind of talked going into today was I think a really interesting topic. A lot of people want to hear about. I think we can expand on. Well, number one, we got to get into why Lyle McDonald, because he came up. I think he's clearly on your mind, Alan, and the fact that why he's got to bug up his ass. About some research that you were involved in with the amount of protein that people need to be eating on a meal by meal or per day basis, and how that protein is distributed around during the day, and what the consequences of that are in relation to muscle protein synthesis, muscle protein breakdown, and achieving a net protein balance, and kind of the discrepancies there, kind of what he's picking at. Because I read through the article that you sent me, and I feel like it's another one of those cases where it's kind of like, let me pick a bone with somebody over some nuances in a way. And that's just kind of how I felt about it. But that's Lyle too, and I think we all admit Lyle's kind of a genius. But at the same time, if he doesn't get along with a lot of people, to put it mildly. And I actually think Lyle is one of the smartest guys out there as far as breaking down research and looking at it. But he doesn't like me either, which is fine. But I think one of the topics we wanted to get on was that one, to talk about protein. That one comes up so much. It's like proper protein intake, how to maximize. But I think that leads into the other topic I think we want to hit on next week, and that is number one: if a guy's natural, wants to stay natural, what is the upper limit of kind of natural bodybuilding or say natural muscular development going to look like for most people? I want to stay away from the outliers. You're going to know if you're a fucking outlier 6 months into the gym if you're training hard, okay? So you're already going to know. You're like, I'm jacked as fuck right now. I'm lean. Like, I did a few curls and some calf raises, and my chest blew up, and it's huge. You're like, dude, that's not normal. You're an outlier. Let's go to the next person. Most of the guys that are kind of out there searching for answers and have that paralysis by analysis, I think, is because that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to find all the right answers and put them in order for themselves to maximize what they have naturally. And I think a really cool topic to go over, like we talked about before, some of the supplements natural guys should be taking advantage of. Scott, that was a great one with the LA stuff for a guy that's like natural and, is trying to, maybe he doesn't know that kind of stuff, and we can go into those. But I think maybe a couple of podcasts on this, it's like expanding, because Scott and I were both natural for a long time. Alan's still natural, never come over to the dark side. We're going to get him to do it before it's all over with. But The point is,
I'm ready for that, man. I'm ready for one of you guys to just sneak up on me with a needle, just bam,
man. Just like put like 3 cc's of Trent in you.
3 cc here, 3 cc's there, baby.
Dude, if I put 3 cc's of Trent in you, like first off, like you would literally go insane for like at the first day.
I'm looking
God, right? Like
you have hour-long coughing
fit. Problems.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some Halo when he's like, I'm going to slip it into his food for like a week. When we get to Colorado, I'm going to give you some Halo. And you're going to be like, why am I so fucking pissed off? Anyway, but I think, I really believe it or not, it sounds funny. It's like I was natural 20 years. I still have I spent a lot of that time what I believe I maxed out my genetics. If we go by the Casey Butt scale, we talk about that. But I think a lot of guys would be interested to hear, like, how do you know if you're maxed out genetically from a natural standpoint? What are some of the, like, when you look at training, when you look at nutrition, all those kind of things? I think we could do like probably a multi-part series for natural guys that would be really interested in this. And I think that's what we'll get into next week. But the protein, starting at the protein consumption for a natural guy. Alan, you got some good data. It's observational, but you got some really excellent data you sent a few weeks ago that we didn't get a chance to look at. I think that a lot of natural guys would be very interested in. And you've talked to a lot of natural guys about their diets, find out that kind of the recommendations and then what these guys do in real life, the practical part, there's kind of a chasm between there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the questions reflect it too. It's like I want to thank the listeners for coming in with the questions that I put up on my Instagram story. Got a ton of questions. Some of the questions were repeated, and I can kind of get a hint as to what you guys want to hear. So I think you're spot on with that, Paul.
Awesome. I think that's probably maybe a good 2 or even 3-part series, maximizing your natural potential. I think a lot of guys would be interested in coming on board for that. Like I said, it's despite the fact that people see me and Scott or whatever, as soon as you put up a picture, they're like steroids. I'm like 2 decades, completely natural, that I spent maximizing all of those things in my life, figuring out exactly how I could milk every ounce of potential that I had out of my training and nutrition. And I was 100% level 5 bro science, mixed in with a little bit of science. Like I said, I try to be the conduit where I'm existing in this no man's land of purgatory between that level 5 bro science stuff and the level 5 pub med guy. I want to stay away from the level 1s on either end. Sure. I appreciate that we came up with that right here organically on the podcast.
That's really important. Seeing the shades of gray, seeing those shades.
You can say, well, you're like, yeah, it's bro science, but it's level 5 bro science. It's pretty close. It really works.
Right.
Round up, man.
Yeah. And people should probably know, if they want more of this flavor and formalize both speaking and in the gym stuff, we're going to be in Colorado, in Denver, at the Armbrust Pro Gym.
It's Wheat Ridge, bro. It's Wheat Ridge.
Wheat Ridge. Okay, well, all right.
I've been there before. If anybody hasn't been out to Armbrust Pro Gym, it is fucking phenomenal.
It's badass from what
it's badass. It is phenomenal. So yeah, we're gonna have 2 days where Alan is going to be laying some serious smackdown. One of the things I think a lot of people aren't getting, absolutely, and laying a smackdown is something Stone Cold Steve Austin did, which you helped with his nutrition stuff that he never gave you fucking credit for, which is really cool. Right, throw that out there. Never gave you credit for helping him. But one of the things I don't think a lot of people are picking up on is that what we're going to do with this whole thing is we're going to, Alan, one of the things you're going to be doing with the nutritional stuff is not just lecturing the fuck out of people. Sure. You're actually going to be talking to people there during the day, like while you're going through your lecture, about how to actually manipulate and set up dietary plans for people who want to maximize everything from natural potential to fat loss to muscle gain, all those kind of things. So we've taken the time out. I don't think a lot of people are getting this to get the flavor of what we're doing. It's going to be a little different than most seminars. We're not just going to be lecturing people all day. Scott and I will be taking people through actual workouts, working on everything from biomechanics to intensity techniques,